Chapter 49:19. Seeing that his safety was guaranteed, Gong Xiu took a sigh of relief and looked at him with a grin. It's so funny, instead of running away, you are throwing yourself into the net? Tell me what benefit the Sun Yen gave you so that you can save him so desperately? Jian Wushuang heard the words, did not speak, obviously too lazy to reply to him. It seemed that he felt being underestimated, and young Master Yu felt annoyed in his heart, but soon calmed down. No matter what benefits the Sun Yen gives you, I will give you more generous benefits, as long as you stay with me, how about? His Sun Yen is by no means a good person, even his own brother can kill. Do you think you will have a good end if you follow him? Instead of following him, it is better to follow me. I assure you that I will give you what you want. Gong Xiu said slowly, a triumphant color flashed in his eyes. And the next moment, what responded to him was an extremely sharp sword intent. He was shocked and hurriedly changed his body shape, but he was still a step late. The sharp sword intent directly left a deep wound on his cheek. Divine blood dripped continuously, soaking his golden armor. Damn thing, you dare to hurt me? Young Master Yu was furious to the extreme, letting blood drip off his face. He suddenly raised his sword. All Yenxian will kill him at all costs. The overwhelming Yenxian crushed and arrived, and the mighty Yen power surged down. Jian Wushuang still stood still on the spot, leading the sword with his hand, fighting the exhaustion of his power, once again released Wushuang Kendo. Wushuang Kendo Zingaheijianyani, the second style. River. The long river of swordsmanship, which started from nowhere, shattered the void and gushed out from every crack, and then gathered in a line, madly rushing towards every Yenxian. All Yanxians were shocked when they saw this scene, and they naturally felt the majestic momentum contained in this sword river. The Foresight Yenxian retreated and walked close to 10,000 feet, but there were also Yenxian who planned to resist, but they were directly strangled into pieces by Jianhe, without even making a sound. Under this sword, nearly 20 Yenxian died. Only after these few encounters, there were only less than 50 immortals brought by Gong Xiu. A wisp of cold sweat gushed from his temples, and he finally understood why the Yenxian who had been dispatched had disappeared cleanly. That Jian Wushuang is very strong. Although he was the peak of immortal relations, he easily obliterated the immortal relations without any effort. Could it be that he really killed Chang Duoling? Gong Xiu's pupils shrank suddenly, and he already regretted coming to this mess. Looking at the Kendo River that was still erupting, Yenxian continued to die. Gong Xiu's expression was uncertain, and in the end his heroic face showed a bit fierce. Immediately afterwards, he stretched out his hand and wiped it on his waist, and a bronze bell the size of a wine cup appeared in his hand. With the appearance of this bronze bell, the energy of the surrounding millions of voids fell silent, showing a strange dark blue color. And around the bronze bell, dark blue crystals are condensing, as if there is life in rhythm. Seeing the bell exposed in the void, Gong Xiu's eyes flashed with fleshy pain. Song Yuzhong, this last time, I hope you can kill all the enemies in front of me for me. He murmured, then gritted his teeth and threw the bronze bell in his hand into the void. The next moment, that bronze bell rose against the storm, and almost instantly formed a terrifying tripod that could encompass thousands of heavens. This scene was too shocking. With the appearance of this bell ding, it seemed that even the boundless void was covered by it. This Wangu great bell named Sangyu Zhong appeared, causing all the eternal immortals to tremble, and the originally broken heavenly Tao could not withstand the pressure, and was fragmented. Jian Wushuang, who was in the center, felt that a life-and-death crisis that had never been imagined was approaching, making him almost ready to escape without even thinking about it. But this Wangu Dezhong is too vast, the universe it encompasses is almost unimaginable, so Jian Wushuang has no possibility to escape. He was ready to escape desperately, only to feel that the strength of his body had become a dead concrete pool, directly imprisoning him in it, unable to move at all. A wisp of cold sweat flowed from Jian Wushuang's temples, and he could feel the breath that contained him. It was the way of heaven. It is a very old way of heaven. It is a way of heaven that does not belong to this era, and it is an extremely old and terrifying rule. Facing such a Tsangyu bell with the ancient heavenly path, Jian Wushuang had nothing to do. He was completely restricted, and he couldn't even do it in the blink of an eye. This is a big ban. I am afraid that even the truth of the heyday cannot get out of the pressure of this Kangwu Zhong. And this Tsangyu clock seemed to be conscious. After binding Jian Wushuang, it quickly shrunk, and from the original supreme distance, a big clock of thousands of miles was formed in a flash. Within this big clock, Jian Wushuang was bound by the dark blue heavenly power, unable to move at all. At this moment, all Yangtzeans are surrounded by the clock, looking at the clock solemnly. Afterwards, young Master Yu moved slowly, his eyes filled with resentment. His Tsangyu bell is the supreme immortal tool belonging to the Wanggu era. It was once the treasure in the hands of his Emperor Zhenweng. It killed countless Dayan immortals, and the heavenly laws contained in it were irresistible. Even the Emperor will suffer. It's just that this Tsangyu clock is now dying, and its service life is only this last time. This Tsangyu Zhong, as the most powerful life-saving trump card of Gong Ziyu, was now used on Jian Wushuang. The thing wasted my last chance of Tsangyu Zhong. I swear, I will turn you into blood, and you will be lost. Gong Ziyu roared in anger. As his voice fell, Tsangyu bell rang, and countless magnificent flowers bloomed from it, illuminating the boundless void. In the Tsangyu bell, Jian Wushuang instantly spouted blood from Qiqiao. He only felt that his whole body was about to be shattered. The unimaginable ancient rules of heaven contain unknown unknowns that can't be said, making Jian Wushuang helpless. Could it be that I fell like this? Divine blood gushed from the corner of his mouth, and he couldn't break free at all. The dark blue heavenly rules were quickly devouring everything about him. The immortal body transformed from an ultra-perfect chaotic creature is rapidly shattering at this moment. However, Jian Wushuang had no way to break free. This was the first time he was truly helpless. That kind of irresistible force is too domineering. Gongzi's hideous face was reflected in his eyes, and all Yangtzeans laughed at this moment. Chapter 49-20. A guy who can even kill Dayan immortal, even make all the immortals lower their eyebrows. Being besieged and suffering at this moment, and going to fall irreversibly, there is nothing more pleasant than this kind of thing. Gong Ziyu didn't even bother to wait and see. The terrible Tsangyu bell couldn't even escape the Nineth ranked Yenxian, let alone a little Yenxian. The immortal body is collapsing. The immortal body disintegrates like stars, never returning. At this moment, under the siege of the dark blue sky, Jian Wushuang's consciousness was blurred. The fairy body is inevitably declining. Even if he is still immortal, I am afraid it will be silent for endless years. Jian Wushuang wanted to contend against the Tao of that day, but found that everything was useless. It was a suppression that completely surpassed the realm, which was unimaginable. Even if he tried his best, he didn't have the slightest chance to destroy the Tsangyu bell. Did I just fall like this? But I'm unwilling. Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes red. The divine blood flowing on his body is quickly repairing the dilapidated immortal body, seeming to be contending against the heavens. Gong Ziyu's gaze condensed. He saw that his figure turned out to be against the heavens. How is this possible? He was shocked, knowing that even the 9th-ranked Dayan immortal could be convinced by this Tsangyu bell. But soon he relaxed again, with some palpitations. Because Jian Wushuang only resisted for a moment, and then irresistibly decayed. When young Master Ziyu was feeling a little palpitating, it was unimaginable that a Yenxian could compete with Tsangyu bell. Just when Gong Ziyu was about to get to know Jian Wushuang in advance, two shaky figures walked from a distant void. The leader was Xiao Dijuan. His luxurious clothes had been damaged, and his exposed skin was full of wounds. But at this moment, his eyes are full of the majesty of the emperor. He glanced at Gong Ziyu, and then walked towards the rapidly shrinking Tsangyu bell. Upon seeing this, Gong Ziyu was overjoyed. He never thought that Xiao Dijuan would actually throw himself into the trap, saving him the trouble of searching. His Royal Highness, do you want us? Yenxian asked. Gong Ziyu waved his hand with an arrogant expression. I want to see what he is doing back with this waste, and I will take him down later. All Yenxian promised. All looked at this scene with a smile. The long and slender palm covered with blood was attached to the outer wall of Zhang. Looking at Jian Wushuang, who was suffering in the clock, Xiao Dijuan knocked on the outer wall with his fingers. Wushuang, Wushuang. Bloody, Jian Wushuang, who was about to fall, opened his eyes with difficulty, looked at the figure outside Zhang Yuzhong. He sighed secretly. Listen to me, Xiao Dijuan affixed to the outside of Zhang Yubel, and said clearly, take out the golden jade ring I gave you earlier and open it. Jian Wushuang could hear his voice, but at this time, it would be difficult to move a finger, let alone take out the golden jade ring in his arms. The little emperor outside Zhang Yuzhong seemed to have known his difficulties, and began to feel at a loss. And young Master Yu, who was far away, heard something was wrong, and he hurriedly issued orders. Hurry up, catch young Master Yen, don't let him speak. All Yenxian hurriedly set off to catch Xiaodigen. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang, who was about to die, struggled to break the fairy body and stretched his palm into his arms with all his strength. Even the ancient unknown heaven can't help but shake. The golden jade ring was taken out, and a unique color appeared in the palm of Jian Wushuang's white bones. Yeah! He roared, his fingers pushed away the jade ring in the center of the golden jade ring. In an instant, an even more remote and unknown aura of heaven burst out of it, turning into billions of tassels. The appearance of that kind of aura made Jian Wushuang loose, and the dark Sai and heavenly Tao bound around him was directly broken. Immediately afterwards, a supreme true figure wearing a white shirt and looking like a star walked out of the golden jade ring. All Wang Gu Tian Dao in Zhang Yubel was crawling on the ground at this moment, and shuddered. He seemed to be an ordinary person without any power, but there was a certain kind of authority in his eyes. And all the immortals who saw this true shadow were frightened, almost unable to stand still, and hurriedly knelt down in the void. The immortal bodies were shaking. Including Jian Wushuang, they were all shocked. What he never expected was that in the golden jade ring that Xiaodigen gave him, there was a true shadow of Zhenliang Emperor. Moreover, this true shadow actually belonged to the true shadow of Emperor Zhenliang in his peak period, full of the meaning of contemplation. The already stupid young Master Yu never expected that a small Zhao would actually hold a true shadow of his emperor in his hands. This is simply incredible and unimaginable. You know, there is no real shadow of the emperor in his hands. With the appearance of the true shadow of the Zhenliang Emperor's peak and prosperous period, Zhang Yubel began to mourn, and it could not withstand the pressure of the emperor. The middle-aged Jin Wu Yang Zhening, at this moment, seemed to have a faint doubt in the eyes of Wan Yu. He looked at the barrier of Zhang Yuzhong, and then casually brushed. This contains the Zhang Yubel of the Supreme Way, and it is directly broken. The residue was scattered in the void, and soon disappeared. Then, Zhenliang Zhening looked at Jian Wushuang, who was dying, and a bit of satisfaction and uncertainty flashed across his eyebrows. Finally he said, "Are you Yenner?" Jian Wushuang, who had no strength to speak, couldn't even shake his head, so he could only look at him firmly. And that Zhenliang Zhening laughed. "Yes, my son Yenner really has the posture of the emperor, even though he is so embarrassed, but it does not matter, there is a father, no one wants to hurt you." Jian Wushuang is completely speechless. Is just a fate. The true shadow of Zhenliang actually regards him as a son. Don't they know each other? Just as Jian Wushuang's spiritual thoughts were empty, Zhen Wuyang, who was full of anger, already looked at the Yangxians who were all kneeling in the void. "A group of ants, dare to hurt me, Yenner." The Sun Yu knelt directly into the void with a plop, and said in shock, "The Emperor, it's me, Im Yuer, your third son." The third son? Zhen Wuyang's true shadow was immediately puzzled. "Isn't I the only one Yenner? Why is there another third son?" Gong Ziyu knew this was a terrible thing, and if he couldn't explain it clearly, he might not have a chance to leave here. So he acted decisively, cut his wrist directly, and spilled the blood in the meridian. If the emperor doesn't believe it, check the blood of the child. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 49-21. Gong Ziyu's voice resounded in the void battlefield, and all Yenxian who knelt on the ground let out a sigh of relief. As long as the emperor can be verified, they will certainly follow. All Yanxian could see that this true shadow of Emperor Wiang was actually sealed for too long, so he didn't know the identity of young Master Yu. Looking at the colorful divine blood sprinkled in the void, the true shadow of Jin Wiang was doubtful and looked at Gong Ziyu solemnly. The corners of his eyebrows twitched, and the cut he made on his wrist just a moment ago was a bit big, causing the blood to flow out not slowly, but a blowout. If this continues, I am afraid it will become weak after a while. The Emperor, you can find out after checking it. Gong Ziyu said nervously, stretching out his hand. Zhen Wiang's true shadow did not hesitate anymore, and with a wave of his palm, he fetched a drop of divine blood. A drop of colorful divine blood lies in the palm of his hand, condensed from an unknown aura that is above the heavens. Zhen Wiang looked at his hand, the blood of the gods throbbed like a swallow, leaping happily, and in a blink of an eye it directly entered the true shadow, moisturizing the true shadow. Retracting his palm, Zhen Wiang took a deep breath. His eyes softened when he looked at Gong Ziyu. You said, you are my third son? Gong Ziyu was overjoyed and hurriedly said, back to the Emperor, I am the third son under your seat, Gong Ziyu. Zhen Wiang heard the words, his original soft eyes suddenly became sharp again. Like two heavenly paths, the directly pressed young man Yu Chang couldn't kneel down. Then why do you want to kill your eldest brother? The cold sweat came out again in an instant, but he quickly handed over and made a bitter and deep enmity, and he murmured, the Emperor, you don't know. Although the eldest brother is the eldest brother, young Master Yen has never done a thing that the eldest brother should do. He was brutal to our 6 brothers. A matter of contravention. 5th young Master Mo, he sent Yanxian to kill. Poor 5th brother, his head was cut off, and Xianyuan was crushed. Gong Ziyu stood up and said, eyes full of tears, and then couldn't help crying. Zhen Wu Yang Zhening, who heard this incident, was so shocked that he couldn't help clenching his palms under the Chinese clothes. Then he murmured, I have 7 sons. Zheng Er actually gave birth to 7 sons for me? The corners of young Master Yes' mouth twitched. It seemed that he had brewed so many emotions, Zhen Wiang didn't even notice. Soon, Zhen Wiang's Zhening returned to his mind, and his brows frowned. If, as he said, the 5th son was killed by Gong Ziyen, then I am afraid that today's affairs will be extremely troublesome. The true shadow left by this true Wiang in the peak period could not be kept for too long, and it was even slowly dissipating. So soon, Zhen Wiang looked at Zhen Wushuang, who was kneeling in the void, covered in blood, and asked, Yenner, what he said is the truth, but you send Yanxian to kill the 5th son under my seat. Being hit by the supreme heavenly Tao in Songyubel was so severe that Zhen Wushuang still couldn't speak at this moment. And the Sun Yu, who was on the opposite side, saw this scene and hurriedly said, the Emperor, you are mistaken. He is not the Sun Yen, the one behind you is the Sun Yen. Zhen Wuyang was startled when he heard the words, and subconsciously looked behind him, only to see that besides Zhen Wushuang, there was a handsome young man standing behind him. With eyes facing each other, Zhen Wuyang frowned soon. Little Emperor immediately bowed slowly, Yenner, I have seen the Emperor. He didn't say much, and directly stretched out his palm and placed it on Xiao Daijin's forehead to probe. Soon, Zhen Wuyang's eyes flashed with sadness and pain. The special physique of the little Emperor could not be concealed at all. So, Yenner, your physique. Zhen Wuyang couldn't speak any more, turned around lonely, and looked at Zhen Wushuang who had recovered. Then which son are you again? The Emperor, it's wrong, he is not the Emperor at all, but the official of the Emperor. Gong Ziyu hurriedly corrected. When Zhen Wuyang heard this, his brows condensed, and he immediately took out a divine blood from Zhen Wushuang's body. The mystery of the divine blood is changeable, showing a hazy color, making it difficult for Yanxian to observe its core. In Zhen Wuyang's palm, Zhen Wushuang's blood was also pulsating, seeming to have some unknown familiarity and tentativeness, but it did not blend into Zhen Wuyang's true shadow, but kept walking. Why, I have a very strong sense of familiarity. Looking at the profound blood in his hand that seemed to be protected by some kind of breath, Zhen Wuyang's Zhening couldn't help but set out to relieve that breath. But soon he was surprised to find that he could not undo the restriction on this drop of blood. Zhen Wuyang's eyes became serious in an instant. He looked at Jian Wushuang and asked again, "You really are not my emperor? Why do I feel a familiar feeling in you?" Jian Wushuang was at a loss. It has only been a few decades since he came to Dayanhuan from the Divine Power Universe. But before that, he had not had any intersection with the entire Desiyu and the heavenly court of Zhenuying. Being able to feel the familiar feeling from him is really tantamount to fantasy. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to deny, the little emperor who hadn't spoken for a long time said, "The emperor, he is indeed not your emperor." Zhen Wuang heard the words and stopped speaking, but the confusion in his eyes deepened. The aura exuding from Jian Wushuang's body feels too familiar to him, like a certain cognitive feeling that is constantly cutting. The young man standing on the opposite side, watching this stagnant scene, couldn't help but secretly worry. Then he gritted his teeth and calm again and said, "Father, please be the master of the fifth brother, and deprive Gongzi Yen of the fairy bones." Void and silent, only this sentence resounded. Depriving the fairy bones, for the little emperor who is unable to practice and has no fairy roots, is completely stripping away his last fairy road. Once the fairy bone peels off, he will fall in a very short period of time, and there is no way to reverse it. Gong Ziyu wanted Xiao Dijuan to fall completely. After hearing the sentence, various complex emotions flowed in Zhen Wuang's eyes. In the end, he looked at Xiaodijin. "Yena, have you done anything like that?" Little Emperor Junqing smiled coldly, his eyes calmed to the extreme. "The Emperor, my son's personality has never changed since he was young. Whether you believe it or not, I don't bother to do this kind of thing. Even if I am incomplete and unable to practice, I still never put them in my eyes, and naturally I will not argue with them." Chapter 49-22. When Xiao Dijuan said this, only a sneer remained in his eyes, and whoever has done that kind of thing, only who knows it in his own mind. After hearing this, Gong Ziyu only felt hot in his ears. He gritted his teeth and said, "You are still arguing the emperor, you must never listen to his side words. I am a one-sided word, then you are not a one-sided word. Of course, if you have evidence, you might as well put it up and verify it on the spot." Xiaodijin said coldly, not giving way. After hearing the sentence, young Master Yu gritted his teeth secretly. Naturally he couldn't produce evidence. Because young Master Mo died too hastily, the mysterious man who killed young Master Mo did not leave any evidence at the scene. Even if the evidence was left with the complete destruction of Baiyin Xianzhou, it no longer exists. In this stagnant atmosphere, Zhen Wuang looked at Gong Ziyu, then waved his hand. "Stop talking about this matter, you take your seat Yen Xian and leave." Gong Ziyu was taken aback, and then hurriedly said, "The Emperor, how is this?" Without finishing a sentence, Zhen Wuang suddenly released unparalleled coercion, overwhelming everything. Under this coercion, Yen Xian couldn't get a foothold, and almost disappeared directly. "Well, the Emperor, we will leave now." Gong Ziyu, who was kneeling in the void and could hardly lift his head, said with difficulty. Zhen Wuang didn't look at him anymore, and directly waved his palm to remove the pressure. The relieved young Master Yu let out a sigh, hiding his resentment in his heart, and then quickly left the void battlefield with less than 50 yen xian. At this point, the entire void battlefield was finally calmed down. And the true shadow of Zhen Wuang was about to dissipate. Countless stars emerged from behind him, and then disappeared into the void. This true shadow that had been sealed in the ring by Zhen Wuang from an unknown time was about to dissipate. Yener. The real shadow of Zhen Wuang was full of guilt and reluctance at the moment. He stretched out his palm to touch Xiao Dijin's cheek. But Xiaodijin subconsciously avoided his palm, then nodded and bowed his head. A touch of loneliness flashed in Zhen Wuang's eyes, but then he recovered his calm, and finally the emperor body slowly dissipated. As he dissipated, he suddenly said, "Yener, I'm sorry for my father." Little Emperor raised his head, his eyes were confused, but he could not find the answer in the end. Accompanied by the true shadow of Zhen Wuang completely disappeared, the void battlefield was completely dead. Jian Wushuang, who had recovered a little bit, let out a sigh of relief. If it weren't for the appearance of True Wuang True Shadow, he would have already turned into blood in that Sangyu Bell at this moment. And Xiao Dijuan stood there, seeming to recall the scene that happened just now. Sun Yen, do you think you can escape? At this time, an angry shout resounded from the depths of the void, and then the chaotic void was illuminated, and the evangelist headed by Gong Ziyu did not leave but turned back. At this moment, his eyes are full of anger, and he can't wait to swallow up the little emperor. Jian Wushuang secretly said a terrible cry. He didn't expect that young Master Yu would be so bold that he even dared to return. At this moment, he hasn't even recovered half of it. It is probably a difficult task to deal with these dozens of immortals and young Master Yu who has endless means. If young Master Yu offered another piece of Wangu immortal device, he would be really powerless to return to heaven. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang looked at Xiaodijundao. You better go, I must be really unable to stand it here. Xiaodijun heard this and smiled and said, the reason why I turned back is to replace you. Now you are driving me away, but it's too unreasonable. Listen to me, you can no longer stay. Even if young Master Ziyu catches me, he doesn't dare to do anything to me. You should leave first. Want to leave? Young Master Yu grinned and pointed to Jian Wushuang. None of you guys want to leave here alive today. Except for young Master Yen, I will kill all the rest. Nua. All the Yenxian promised, and at the same time they released the Yanlabi training, surrounded from all directions. It seems that I can't leave if I want to go. Jian Wushuang sighed softly, and an invisible sword was quietly condensed in his palm. Seeing this long sword came out, all Yanxians were afraid. They all escaped from Jian Wushuang's sword, so naturally they did not dare to underestimate Jian Wushuang. Under his sword, Yenxian trembled. It is the first time that every Yenxian has dealt with that terrible kendo. Before that, none of them had seen such a terrible opponent who could use kendo. But they have orders and can only bite the bullet and challenge. Combining the power of 50 immortals, layer upon layer of majestic and surging barriers, Chao Jian Wushuang and Xiaodijun surrounded. Jian Wushuang, who is far from recovering, may be difficult to fight. He estimated that if he could release 2 sword intents at most, he would be exhausted. When the barriers around his body were almost thick to a certain level, Jian Wushuang, who was originally calm, suddenly changed his Bodis aura, like a real sword completely out of its sheath. Thousands of sword intent loomed around, full of a sense of incomparable killing. The next moment, he held an invisible sword and dropped a straight cut. Wushuang Kendo Zingaheijianyani, the first style. As the starting sword of the entire spectrum of Wushuang Kendo, Xing is the most vigorous sword, full of awe-inspiring. It's just that this mediocre straight cut has broken countless strengths. The infinite sword intent rushed and vented wildly, and nearly 100 ons burst into it. Under this sword, even the void shook, and the barrier that combined the power of 50 immortals was directly cut through a gap, and then it broke out of control. Seeing this scene, Gong Ziyu was shocked. Quickly block it for me. If anyone dares to let him go today, I will strip you alive. All Yanxians were horrified, but in the end they bit their heads and pushed them up. At this moment, each of them completely released the power of Yenxian, trying to trap Jian Wushuang and the others. They did it. This sword was originally Jian Wushuang's exhausted sword, and the successor was weak and unable to escape. The infinite sword intent dissipated, looking at Jian Wushuang, Xiaodijun, and the thin purple robe who were besieged by Yanli. Gong Ziyu couldn't help but smile. After 6 days of destruction, the young master was captured. That is the ultimate goal of this battle. However, when the smile on Gong Ziyu's face had not dissipated, he saw several streamer-like figures rushing from here right in front of him, the speed of which was even instantaneous. Not good, there is a change. His eyelids twitched, and then he could see that everyone who came here was actually a fairy. There are a total of 7 bodies with a powerful body, walking slowly, like the sharpest sword intent, walking towards Gong Ziyu. He stepped back subconsciously, then gritted his teeth. Chapter 49-23. With Diqing as the head, the 7 Yanxians descended. Qin Qing, Chuanqiu, Cui Jing, Zhao Ting, Wei Liujia, Fengshan, none of them were absent. My lord Bangshan is late. A blast resounded through the void, Fengshan shouted angrily, his bare chest, like a true peak, swept towards Jian Wushuang. Immediately afterwards, Qin Qing, Spring and Autumn, went forward one by one, with an unrelenting momentum. Today they have all returned to their heyday. The heavy damage suffered before has been restored to the peak period by Di Qing. Rank 9 Dian Immortal was still terrifying, although Di Qing Yuan did not recover, but they still easily recovered. Their battle was just to rescue Jian Wushuang. Boom! Fengshan, who looked like a savage bull, directly tore a crack in the Yanli barrier with all his strength, and then slammed into it. Why are you here? Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang was both surprised and delighted. Of course I will come later, or the Lord is in danger. Fengshan flushed, and he desperately stuck in the middle of the crack, not allowing it to close again. Sir, I can't hold it anymore, so hurry away. Qin Qing followed closely. He directly drew out the real sword from his waist and lay it directly in the middle of the crack. Then he said, Brother Sword, little emperor, go. Jian Wu doubled his head, no longer hesitating, and directly pulled up Xiao Dijuan and the thin purple robe, and rushed out of the crack. Damn it, kill all of them, not one. Young Master Ziyu was already completely frustrated, damaged at Songyu Bell, and got into so many seats, Yanxian, yet he couldn't capture the next young Master Yan. He could no longer remain calm. Only the remaining 40 or so Yanxians rushed forward again, knowing that this extremely unequal battle had quietly reversed. It seems that there are only 7 ordinary Yanxians, and the remaining 6 Yanxians except Di Qing are enough for them to drink a pot. Qin Qing, Chun Qiu, Cui Jing and the others all had 2 or 3 D-pin pills in their mouths at this moment. Once they were injured, swallowing them directly would restore most of their physical strength in an instant. After being led by Qin Qing and Fengshan, Chuanxiu sent a large number of D-pin pills, all of which were used to repair the heavy damage. After Jian Wushuang quickly stuffed Xiao Dijuan and thin purple robe a few, the rest of his brain was stuffed into his mouth. Nearly 10 D-pin pills were put into the mouth, and directly turned into violent energy that impacted the limbs. Unexpectedly, he almost burst Jian Wushuang's fairy body. All injuries were immediately cleared and restored to peak state. At this moment, Jian Wushuang only felt that the meridians in Xian's body were about to explode, and he needed to vent out. His eyes were crimson, and the surging patterns all over his body had almost doubled or more, and then he looked at Gong Ziyu in the distance. The 4 eyes were facing each other, a great crisis between life and death, which shocked Gong Ziyu. The next moment, Jian Wushuang went straight to him. The void collapsed, and a crimson streamer cut the void forward. Unable to restrain the restless Jian Wushuang in the immortal's body, he probably didn't even know it. He had already unconsciously opened the way of killing. Quickly stop her, Gong Ziyu said in shock, and at the same time backed away quickly. Nearly 10 Yanxian arrived first, holding their respective forces, trying to hold Jian Wushuang. But at this time, he is no longer in the previously unrecovered state. Jian Wushuang in his heyday was already able to fight the 3rd-rank Dian Immortal, let alone them. The praying man arm is a car, and he does not have his own strength. Jian Wushuang, who was in charge of the way of killing, didn't even turn into an invisible sword, and slammed a heavy punch directly. This heavy punch is enough to easily destroy the universe. The scarlet fist and the wind smashed out, and the first Yanxian who came to greet him was too late to make any sound. He was directly blasted into blood mist and disappeared. Moreover, the fist's strength and the wind did not diminish. After smashing the first Yanxian, another 6 Yanxian killed. Boom, boom, the blood mist was permeating, and there were only 3 Yanxians who stepped forward to block them. Gong Ziyu was already shocked, and he didn't plan to stay here anymore. He turned and flew over the immortal formation that was far away. Go away! Jian Wushuang, who had been slightly changed by the way of killing, was furious. Facing the Yanxian who had less than 30 in front of him, he chose to rush over. Boom, boom. Each punch is enough to destroy a source of immortality. Jian Wushuang is like a demon who surpasses the heavens, and slays all immortals neatly. All Yanxian was so vulnerable in front of him, even unable to defend, they were smashed to the Xianyuan and fell miserably. It was only a few dozen breaths of time, and only 7 of the 30 Yanxian were killed. They were all terrified, no longer dared to resist, and fled straight into the wild. "Want to go?" Jian Wushuang sneered coldly. He raised his palm, and suddenly thousands of chain-like scarlet light beams scattered in all directions. The 7 immortals fleeing in the wild were instantly caught, and then dragged to him. "Duh, my lord, let me wait, we don't want to be an enemy of my lord, it's all because of the 3 Highness." Without finishing a sentence, the 7 Yanxians were directly strangled into pieces by the scarlet chain. Jian Wushuang was never soft on his enemies. As for letting go of his life, it was a fantasy. After slaying all Yanxian, he directly flew towards the young Master Yu who was about to flee. The murderous intent in his eyes is great, and he has listed it as a must-kill target deep in his heart. Seeing getting closer and closer to the fairy formation, Gong Ziyu let out a sigh of relief. However, just as he was about to rush into the immortal formation, a great crisis of life and death surged in his mind. He did not even think about it, and tried his best to hide away. Boom! The power of scarlet came over the sky and directly destroyed the fairy formation. Along with the violent force of the sky, Jian Wushuang, whose eyes sinking like water walked slowly. Cold sweat falling from the sideburns. Gong Ziyu stood there, shaking uncontrollably. Judging from the previous style of acting, Jian Wushuang, who had cut the grass and roots, and was extremely cold, obviously did not intend to let him leave. He knew with great confidence that Jian Wushuang would not be afraid of him because he was the son of the 3rd emperor and would not dare to start. It is precisely because of this that Gong Ziyu has fallen into despair. He never thought that one day he would actually be so close to death. Out of fear of falling, Gong Ziyu trembled. No, you can't do it. I am the 3rd emperor under the emperor's seat. If you do it to me, you will definitely pay the price by then. As long as you let me go, I will completely forget everything that happened today. Chapter 49-24. Only Gu Leng was left in Jian Wushuang's eyes, looking at him with a smile. "Only, as long as you don't kill me, I promise you will never do anything against you from now on." Gong Ziyu has completely abandoned the arrogant belonging to the emperor, and almost begged. I am the 3rd brother of Gong Ziyan, he is my emperor brother, he will definitely not let you move me. When he said this, he even began to shamelessly call out the name of Xiao Dijuan. But he didn't know that Jian Wushuang was not affiliated with Xiaodigen at all, and even their relationship was equal. Wanting to use Xiaodigen to suppress him is no different from idiotic dreams. Young Master Yu pulled his throat and called out Xiao Daijian's name loudly, but then Jian Wushuang pointed like a knife and cut off his entire left arm with a palm. Divine blood spurted out, the fairy body shattered, Gong Ziyu's screams resounded, clutching his broken arm and staggering back. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold, and he had no intention of letting him go. If it weren't for the appearance of the true shadow of the emperor, then Song Yuzhong would definitely be able to kill Jian Wushuang. It is precisely because of this that he gave birth to a murderous heart. In this unending situation, once young Master Ziyu is released, then I am afraid Jian Wushuang will be extremely passive in the future. So Gong Ziyu must die. At this moment, he didn't even consider the existence of Zhen Wuyang and Heavenly Court. The palm that was surging with scarlet power fell again, and Gong Ziyu's right leg was directly cut off, and the blood spurted out. Without the support of one leg, Gong Ziyu suddenly sat in the chaotic void, looking at Jian Wushuang with a gray face. He had seen the decisive killing intent from Jian Wushuang Sen's cold eyes, and there was no room for recovery. Gong Ziyu had regretted it to the extreme. He shouldn't have made the idea of cleaning the battlefield and capturing Xiaodigen alive. Without this idea, it would not end up in this situation. Don't kill me, I don't want to die. I can give you whatever you want. The sun's feathers are like ashes. Emperor's luck, I will use the Emperor's luck to replace my life, can't it? Jian Wushuang was too lazy to listen to him anymore, and the killing aura in his hand was so strong that it turned into a long and narrow blood blade. In the next moment, He raised the blood blade in his hand and cut it down without any hesitation. The young man's eyes are about to split, his face is like ashes. However, the blood blade was not cut down, as if it had been hindered, hovering over his head. Jian Wushuang turned his head and looked behind him. Di Qing had already come to him, casting a spell to stop his movement. Di Qing placed his palm on Jian Wushuang's shoulder and patted gently, and then whispered, "Leave it to me to do it," he said, and then walked slowly to young Master Yu, who was shaking like chaff. Gong Ziyu rumming amnesty, save me, I can give you all the luck of the emperor." The one who responded to him was Jin Yu, who was extremely sharp. Each golden feather is enough to break the heavens and penetrate any super-universe. Thousands of golden feathers passed through, directly shooting Gong Ziyu's fairy body into powder, and even Xian Yuan was completely crushed. The third emperor under the seat of Zhen Wuyang, Gong Ziyu, died. Void wailing, all the luck belonging to the emperor returned to the universe, and could no longer be collected. Seeing this scene, Xiao Daijin's figure was shocked, and he slowly backed up a few steps. If he hadn't been dragged by the thin purple robe, he would collapse. Gong Ziyu died in front of his eyes, various emotions changed in his eyes, and finally closed his eyes tightly. The magnificent and majestic 10-pointed wings slowly moved behind Di Qing, reflecting the chaos and void. Under the random blow of rank 9 Dian Immortal, even the emperor was easily destroyed. The invincible Sun Yu fell completely. Putting away the way of killing, Jian Wushuang has recovered his calmness. He looked at Di Qing and slowly said, "Why do you want to do this?" Putting away the 10 wings, Di Qing calmly said, "Because he is the emperor of Zhen Wuyang. Once you behead him, you will definitely suffer Zhen Wuyang's revenge, and you will never survive from him." Having said this, he paused and said, "I am different. Even if he shoots me, I can protect myself." Jian Wushuang was moved in his heart, and he understood that the reason why Di Qing did this was to protect him. Immediately, he solemnly said, "Thank you, I owe you once. Between you and me, there is no need to say thank you." Di Qing raised his eyebrows and smiled, and then said, "It's just that, next, I'm afraid I will be away for a while." Just when Jian Wushuang was about to ask him where he was going, an unspeakable aura of grandeur quietly enveloped the entire void battlefield. That kind of breath was magnificent to the extreme. Wherever that breath was shrouded, the years stopped passing and were completely sealed. The broken heaven was reshaped, and the chaotic void was quickly repaired. Jian Wushuang, who was completely unable to move half a minute, his eyes widened and he looked forward in disbelief. Everything is going back. What kind of existential power should be able to complete the retrospective? The luck and aura that had originally dissipated began to condense like stars. Soon, under the condensing of the stars and streamers, a figure that could not be more familiar appeared again. The dead Sun Yu, who had been killed by Di Qing and was irreversible, was actually reborn. At the same time, the chaotic void was torn apart, and a series of figures that were so powerful that they were indescribable appeared from the end of the void. They all carry various colored wheels of light on their backs, and it is hoped that the ancient heavens will circulate in them. Only rank 6 Dian Immortal can condense the light wheel, and they are all the veteran Dian Immortal under the seat of Zhen Wuyang. For each one, the minimum is 9 turns. Even the newly born Tao of heaven crawls under their feet. And at the front of these elders, Dian Immortal, was a figure with a tired complexion and no aura. Although he was extremely ordinary, you read www.akanshu. Calm, but let all the elders behind him surrender. All the violent power, aura, and even the heavens on the void battlefield can't get close to him. Lord of Heaven, Emperor Zhen Wuyang is here. Jian Wushuang felt that the blood in the meridians was solidified, and in front of that kind of breath, he couldn't even breathe. Coming to the battlefield of the void, Emperor Zhen Wuyang looked tired, but still carried the supreme authority. Seeing Gong Ziyu, who opened his eyes and looked confused, his expression was extremely blue. Emperor Father, am I still alive?" Gong Ziyu, who had recovered from the confusion, was extremely excited when he saw Zhen Wuyang's presence. However, what awaited him was not a concerned inquiry, but a heavy slap. The emperor was angry and directly drove him far away. Chapter 49-25. Not long after reshaping the immortal body, the young Master Yu, who was in the weakest state, had his 7 orifices gushing with blood, and was almost killed by this slap again. Then, Zhen Wuang stretched out his hand again and shook him directly back in front of him. Covering the divine blood pouring out of his nose with his hand, the Sun Yu said timidly, "The Emperor, why do you want to beat the child?" Taking a deep breath, Zhen Wuang pointed to the entire broken void and said in a deep voice, "Did you do it here?" Hearing this, he suddenly fainted a little. "Yes, it's not just me." When Zhen Wuang heard this, he anxiously wanted to pump him a few more times, but eventually he retracted his palm. The magnificent and terrifying aura on the void battlefield disappeared, Jian Wushuang and others panted, and then all backed away. The breath that Zhen Wuang dropped was too vast. Even Di Qing, who was the 9-ranked Great Yen Immortal, had no way to compete, let alone them. Jian Wushuang's temples were sweating like syrup, and if Zhen Wuang were to kill him in pain, he would never escape. Immediately afterwards, Zhen Wuang slowly swept over them, and after staying on Jian Wushuang and Di Qing for a while, he quickly looked at Xiaodigen again. "Yenner, tell me what's going on," he said solemnly. "The whole void is broken into this way. It's not just a battle." Little Emperor did not hesitate when he heard the words. Dang even told Zhen Wuang what had happened. This war involving more than 1,000 Yangxians was the most massive battle ever since Zhen Wuang Emperor opened up the Great Division domain. The complexity of the forces involved and the wide spread of immortals are cut off from the past and the present. So that when Xiao Dijuan recounted such a scene of a tragic war, Zhen Wuang, including the patriarchs behind him, was shocked. An immortal is an existence of absolute status in the ordinary universe. They transcend the way of heaven, beyond the shackles of 99%, even if you look at Dianhuan, they are all absolute existences. But at the moment, they died in batches in the void battlefield. Just because of this inexplicable battle. When Zhen Wuang and a group of elders, De Yenxian, heard about the equal forces on both sides, they were truly shocked. With less than 200 Yenxian, he resisted the attack of nearly 2,000 Yenxian and 3 Dianxian, and completely saved the 6-day realm. How can that be? 120 can still keep the 6-day realm? At the end, Xiao Dijuan looked at Jian Wushuang and Di Qing and said, "If it weren't for their help, the 6-day realm would have been destroyed, and even I would have fallen into this melee. So, he's it." He pointed angrily at young Master Yu who was kneeling in front of Zhen Wuang. Gong Xiu suddenly sat in the void and waved his hands repeatedly. No, not just me, this matter has nothing to do with me." Zhen Wuang took a deep breath. The Dihui emanating from his body couldn't help but fluctuate. This is really horrible, and such a fierce battle erupted in just a short time after he left the 6-day realm. This battle, if it were placed in any position of the Great Division region without being prevented, would be extremely terrifying destruction. Fortunately, this war has completely subsided. Zhen Wuang's eyes were as sinking as water, and he almost swallowed young Master Hanyu. No, the Emperor, it has nothing to do with me at this time, it has nothing to do with me." He kept backing away, with horror in his eyes. But Zhen Wuang didn't start pumping him again, but said in a deep voice, "You can never mobilize so many immortals. Now tell me who else is besides you." Hearing this, Gong Ziyu had hesitation and struggle in his eyes, as if he wanted to keep this secret. But the struggle and hesitation in his heart only existed for a moment, and then he said, "Going back to the Emperor, it's the 2nd brother and the 6th brother." Hearing this sentence, Zhen Wuang was furious. Okay. You 3 have such bold guts to mobilize so many immortals to kill the elder brother? Now killing my brother, is it going to kill the Emperor in the future? His face was gloomy and terrible, and he was obviously really angry. When the Sun Yu heard this, he immediately trembled as sifting chaff. "The Emperor, it is definitely not what you think, there is a reason for all of this." Forcibly resisting the anger rising from the bottom of his heart, Zhen Wuang gave him a disappointed look. From now on, you will stay for a full year. The mantra of the emperor, the way of heaven, was established, and countless ways of the emperor and heaven were born directly at this moment. A series of mysterious dense patterns flowed in the void, and each of them represented the emperor's way of heaven. The entire emptiness was shrouded by Dihui, and the emperors and lords descended. Gong Xiu was so frightened that he couldn't add to it. Having been banned for a year, that is simply unimaginable. A Huanyan represents that even the celestial plane constructed by heavenly Tao will be extinguished, turning into star fragments and disappearing into the boundless void. One Huanyan represents that a monk is enough to grow to the terrifying point of becoming an immortal. One Huanyan almost represents infinite years, and it is the alternate node of the newly born Tiandao instead of the old one. Gong Xiu was imprisoned for a full year, which was the most severe punishment. No, not the emperor. Everything is the son of the sun, who made me do this. I am innocent. Gong Xiu shouted in despair, but the emperor's heavenly way had already come down, like chains, instantly imprisoning him. Then, the void collapsed to reveal an unknown space, and Emperor Tiandao directly dragged young Master Yu into it and sealed it up. The void was wiped out, and the singularity that belonged to the emperor's heavenly path was slowly moving. In that unknown space, the third son of the emperor, Ziyu, was sealed and banned for a full year. The void was silent. All the elders, Dianxian, shook their heads and sighed, then cast their eyes on Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. Soon the elder Dianxian recognized Di Qing, who was beside Jian Wushuang. Why, how could be him? That ancestral golden crow? Didn't he already die at that time? All the elders Dianxian began to whisper together. At this time, Emperor Zhen Wuyang noticed Di Qing. Talk about it, why are you here? Invisibly, the emperor's prestige came down, pressing all the immortals to be a little unable to support it. Di Qing secretly gritted his teeth. He was fully fighting against the coercion of the emperor. At this time, the little emperor stepped forward and stood in front of Jian Wushuang and Di Qing, and said loudly, "If it weren't for their full resistance, I'm afraid that the Lu Tian realm and I would have died in the void. Father, you can ask me anything you want, and I will answer them for them." Zhen Wuyang wanted to speak again. He also knew that this battle was too tragic and involved too many forces, and it was precisely the entire six-day realm that was a complete victim. Chapter 49-26. Without the existence of Jian Wushuang, Di Qing and others, facing the Yanxian army, there is only one way to destroy the six-day realm. Therefore, Zhen Wuyang did not feel embarrassed at this time. The battle to destroy the six-day realm was a premeditated war. If it is not investigated, it may leave the source of disaster. After a moment of contemplation, Zhen Wuyang spoke again. "Gong Ziyu, who of you killed it?" Jian Wushuang's heart sank when he heard this. As Di Qing said, Zhen Wuyang would really get to the bottom. Just when Xiao Dijuan was about to speak, Jian Wushuang took a step ahead of him and said calmly, "I killed him." All the elder Dianxian turned their eyes to him, as if they had some regrets in their eyes. Di Qing was startled slightly, then turned to look at Jian Wushuang, and various emotions flashed in his eyes. Immediately afterwards, Zhen Wuyang said solemnly, "Then you know, what is the crime of beheading the emperor?" Emperor Majesty put pressure on him. He gritted his teeth and resisted not letting himself fall. I only know that if you don't kill him, I will be in danger." The long sword was in the air. A sword smashed away the emperor's coercion, and blocking Jian Wushuang's body, the little emperor raised the long sword in his hand and pointed it straight at Zhen Wuyang. "Little emperor, put down your sword." All the elders Dianxian stepped forward to put pressure on the little emperor at this moment. But he was still unmoved, holding up the true sword in his hand, pointed at Zhen Wuyang with the tip of the sword, and did not give in a step. "Do you dare to do it to me?" Zhen Wuyang said in a deep voice. At this moment Dihui shined to the extreme. Under Emperor Hui, Chen Qing and the others all snorted, and involuntarily a ray of divine blood came out from the corner of their mouth. The extremely weak little monarch retreated a few steps, his ears and nose bleed out of blood. But he blocked Jian Wushuang again, raised his true sword, and aimed at Zhen Wuyang again. Then he said in a hoarse voice, "Why not dare?" A touch of disappointment flashed in Zhen Weiyang's eyes, and then he casually raised his hand, and heaven put pressure on it. The real sword in Xiaodaijian's hand broke into hundreds of pieces at the sound, and his figure was directly suppressed by the emperor's heaven. "Let go of me, Zhen Weiyang!" He roared, but there was no way to break free of this restraint. Facing the little emperor directly calling the emperor's name, Zhen Weiyang didn't care, but instead turned his gaze to Jian Wushuang. "Really you?" At this time, a lazy voice resounded abruptly in the void, and Di Qing walked to the front of Zhong Yanxian. "Hey, look at me, I can kill the emperor and scrupulously, in this entire big division. Apart from me, I am afraid there is no second immortal." After saying this sentence, Di Qing resolutely burst out the wings of 10 directions. In an instant, the magnificent power that belonged to the ninth rank Great Yanxian swayed in the void. The magnificent 10-party wings are blooming, and the clear ancestral veins are also stretched for thousands of miles at this moment. "Ha!" The golden crow treasure screamed, the sacred magnificence to the extreme. Di Qing is actively fighting Zhen Weiyang. Even though he is the 9th rank Dian immortal, facing the emperor, he is not even worth mentioning. Just a wisp of emperor's luck can easily kill any Dian immortal, even Di Qing is no exception. If you want to describe the distance between them, it would be Machin and Haoyue, even more incomparable. But it was such a grandiose and proud truth that Zhen Weiyang didn't even mention the slightest interest in fighting. He just looked at Di Qing with some interested eyes. "Golden Crow, you never seem to be afraid of me?" Di Qing smiled slightly and looked directly at Zhen Weiyang Dao. "To be honest with you, even if you become the emperor, I was really not afraid at the beginning. Even now I am not afraid because I am afraid that it will not solve any problems, so we removed such an unstable factor from the blood." "Are you really afraid of me?" Zhen Weiyang narrowed his eyes slightly. Di Qing's eyes narrowed slightly. Of course. The atmosphere was deadly silent. For the first time, Dian Immortal dared to confront the emperor. In the eyes of those elders, Dian Immortal was an extremely strange scene. Zhen Weiyang has fought and killed all his life, and he has killed several emperors before opening up the current big division domain. But now, facing this guy who could just be crushed to death, he didn't rush to do it. "Sure enough, your Xinxing is still the same as before. As the Golden Crow ancestral vein, you are rumored to have 9 true fate. I'm afraid this is the reason why you dare to confront me." "Zhen Weiyang Emperor, you said, what if I destroy your 9 true lives now?" Di Qing heard this, and his heart tightened slightly. He had hidden the deepest trump card, but he didn't expect Zhen Weiyang to know it. He now has only 7 true lives left. If Zhen Weiyang is determined to condemn him, I am afraid that he will fall completely today. Thinking of this, Di Qing gritted his teeth and said nothing. But Zhen Weiyang didn't seem to want to know Di Qing's answer either. He directly stretched out his index finger in the void. In an instant, all the general trends that Di Qing had built were like a mirror flower, directly broken. Di Qing's mouth was full of blood, and his eyes widened to the maximum. Zhen Weiyang looked at him and said in a deep voice, "Beheading the emperor is a capital crime for you, but if you have other unavoidable ideas, this emperor will save you from death. But immediately, I will exile you to the borderless sea for 1 year." As soon as the emperor's mantra came out, the way of heaven appeared. Layers of chains then bound Di Qing. After Di Qing heard the penalty, his expression changed drastically. "A Chinese year, do you plan to let this seat be completely lost in it?" But he only left this sentence, and his body completely disappeared into the void. Jian Wushuang got up and pursued, but in the end he couldn't catch it. Exile from the endless sea, in just 6 words, it contains endless horror and coldness. Chang Duoling, who killed 9 heavens with his own power, was once exiled to the sea of no edge. But he didn't know how to escape, and he was extremely cautious about the endless sea. Where the unknown lies, is probably the real purgatory. Gong Ziyu was imprisoned for a full year, and Di Qing was banished from the sea of endless. Everything seems to be just the beginning. Zhen Weiyang slowly swept across the only remaining Yanxian on the void battlefield, and finally stopped his gaze on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang also did not evade, even looking at him coldly. For some reason, Zhen Weiyang felt a very familiar and unfamiliar feeling when he stared at that pair of eyes. At the same time, there is a real feeling of sitting on an equal footing. This surprised Zhen Weiyang's heart. Why would such a small Yanxian give him such a feeling? An existence that does not even belong to a realm has already made Zhen Weiyang vigilant at this moment. That kind of vigilance is unprecedented for Zhen Weng. Chapter 49-27. Even in the age of reverence, the age of the emperor traversing the ages, there are very few existences that can make him directly feel threatened. This is simply absurd. Zhen Weiyang directly discarded the absurdity that had arisen in his heart and returned to normal. At the same time, he was a little puzzled. What exactly is the familiar feeling that Jian Wushuang exudes? Why is it familiar? After thinking about it for a while, Zhen Weiyang didn't intend to find out. He only came to Desiu and noticed the abnormal fluctuations here, so he rushed over. Now that the crisis of the six-day realm has been lifted, he has to return to the heavens to deal with some hidden dangers. Reaching out his hand to dissipate the Emperor Heavenly Tao that had bound the little emperor, Zhen Weiyang wanted to say nothing, and finally did not say anything, leading a group of elder Dainxian to leave. The originally shattered and chaotic void was repaired by the Emperor Heavenly Tao again, and there was no trace of the trauma of the war, and it was as clean as if nothing had happened. Even the universe that was affected and destroyed was reshaped, but the billions of creatures in it eventually disappeared. Seeing this clean void flowing with the galaxy, Qin Qing and others were a little lost. Here, a tragic battle took place, nearly 2,000 fairy gods, and 3 of them were buried here. But at this moment, they all disappeared without a trace. With a light cough, Xiao Dijuan slowly came to Jian Wushuang, his eyes dimmed and said, "I'm sorry." Jian Wushuang shook his head. "It's not to blame you. The matter is here, what I want to think about is how to make up for it. Brother Sword, what are your plans? No matter what, I, Qin Qing, will be the first to follow you." Walking out from behind, the Qin Qingning said, his eyes firm. "I still have a copy. Fengshan will never back down." Fengshan, who is taller than Qin Qing's figure, said, patting his chest. Then, Chuanqiu, Cui Jing, and Wei Liujia also took a step forward at this moment. In addition to firmness, their faces were more determined. However, hesitation flashed in Zhao Ting's eyes, and in the end he did not take a step forward, but stayed in place. Reluctantly smiled, Jian Wushuang turned to look at them and said, "What are you doing? The war is over and there is no fighting. Go back and take care of it." "Brother Sword, is there really nothing to do?" Qin Qing asked. Jian Wushuang nodded. "Of course not. Now your top priority is to recover from your injury, so as not to leave a hidden illness." The war finally ended completely, and nearly 2,000 Yanxians were buried in the void battlefield. The six-day realm was finally preserved, but the foundation was completely destroyed, and only 1,000 people were left to repair. The young Master Qian who came to the aid was also badly injured, and now only 3 of the 100 immortals he brought were left. But instead of lamenting, he was extremely excited. With more than 200 Yanxian fighting against more than 2,000 Yanxian, and finally defending the six-day realm, this is an impossible battle, but it actually happened in the end. The reason why Gong Ziqian was excited was because he saw the hidden secrets of the six-day realm. His desperate bet this time is a right bet. Getting the bet right means that from now on, no longer need to look at the face of Gong Zijie, his ethereal Xianzhou will be temporarily safe. However, Gong Ziqian is still a little worried at the moment. The six-day realm has now declined, and whether the ethereal Xianzhou can be taken into account in the future is still unknown. Thinking of this, he still regrets it. If he comes a few days late, it would be nice not to catch up with this war. At the end of the war, the top repairers who had been sent far away returned to the six-day realm one after another. Every top repairer, after going through such a big battle, completely transformed into a long one. If you want to survive such a fierce battle, only if you become stronger can you have a chance. The realm of Yanxian is the ultimate goal they are determined to pursue. After 6 days, it returned to silence, still cold. Sitting on the roof of the reconstructed Tiangong, Jian Wushuang was sitting with his eyes closed. In this tragic battle, he gained his strongest sword intent, and his own swordsmanship has reached the stage of perfection. Once Wushuang Kendo is fully integrated, Jian Wushuang will enter the realm of Sword Fairy. By then, I am afraid that he will be enough to fight the 9 turns Yanxian. Jian Wushuang, who had obtained his strongest sword intent, was not happy at the moment. He even sat on the eaves of the heavenly palace without any expression. Countless terrifying powers surged around him, and at the same time he quickly swallowed a few Emperor Pin pills. He is recovering to the peak with all his strength, and even trying to break through. The whole generation of Xiao Gudian's birth was gathering towards him, and the heavens and the earth changed. I don't know how long it took. When Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes, he couldn't help showing a sense of loss in his eyes. Could it be that there is no way to be promoted to Dayan Immortal? Jian Wushuang was indeed attacking Dayan Immortal, but he ultimately failed. The failure this time was far more terrifying than any previous failure to break through. Because this time, the situation is completely different. As an ultra-perfect chaotic creature, his road to breakthrough and promotion is extremely difficult, and once the breakthrough is successful, he will completely crush enemies of the same level. Although the road to breakthrough and promotion is extremely difficult, it is not without road. If you describe every realm as a misty unknown cloud, although it is impossible to achieve, there is still a way to be understood. But Jian Wushuang now felt that his realm could no longer make a breakthrough, because his realm forward has completely reached the end. After becoming a fairy, there is no realm to break through. A wisp of cold sweat gushed from Jian Wushuang's temples. He didn't expect that his path of promotion would stop in the realm of evolving immortals. As for the realm of day evolving above immortals, he had no perception at all. There was a bit of bitterness in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and he also knew the reason. He came from the universe of divine power and did not belong to Dayanhuan's cultivation system at all, even though he cut off the past of Hongqian and gained power. But after all, Xianyuan could not be born. And without Xianyuan, it means that he will never be able to be promoted to Dayan Immortal. There must be other ways. This is definitely not my end. Slowly exhaling a mouthful of muddy breath, Jian Wushuang's eyes gradually became firmer. Since there is no path in front of you, then abruptly blaze a trail. If the road can't even be opened up, it doesn't hurt to ruin the mountain in front of you. However, in the next plan, I am afraid he will be extremely passive. Originally, Jian Wushuang planned to break through the realm of Yanxian with all his strength during this time and reach Dayanxian, but everything failed. Chapter 49-28. The realm of Dayan Fairyland. He was temporarily out of reach. But this is about his decision to go to the borderless sea. Originally, he planned to break through the realm of Dayan Immortal and go to the Sea of Wordlessness to find the truth, which would have some chances of winning, but now, everything is full of unknowns. However, even so, Jian Wushuang had already made the decision to go to the borderless sea. Diqing was banished because he was exiled, and bringing him out of it was something he had to do. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang left his depressed mood behind him, and left Xiao Gudian in a flash. In front of Daegu Tian Palace, Jian Wushuang had quietly arrived, and he quickly entered the temple under the clouds. The thin purple robe seemed to have been waiting for a long time. Seeing Jian Wushuang coming, he directly greeted him and said, "Master Jian, Xiao Dijuan is a little unwell. I'm afraid I can't see you." Jian Wushuang heard the words and frowned slightly. "I only asked him about one thing." "Master Jian, Xiao Dijuan is a little unwell. I'm afraid I can't see you." The thin purple robe still stood in front of him, obviously not planning to let him in. "I'm afraid he's not sick at all." Jian Wushuang looked straight at the thin purple robe and said, "He doesn't want to see me?" The thin purple robe dodged his eyes slightly, and then said slowly, "Master Sword, in fact, His Highness does not want you to go there." He didn't finish his words, and was interrupted by the little emperor who walked out from the depths of the heavenly palace. "My buddy, you go down." The thin purple robe agreed, and then stepped back. "Come in and sit, I don't want to see you," Xiaodijin said quietly. Jian Wushuang didn't care either. He urgently needed to know how to get to the borderless sea. How to get to the borderless sea? He walked forward quickly and asked straightforwardly. Xiao Dijuan didn't look back, as if thinking about something, and finally said, I don't want you to go there. But you know I have to go. Jian Wushuang said the same. Xiaodigen turned around and suddenly stretched out his palms to hold his arms tightly, and then said, A Chinese year is very fast. Can you not go? It only takes a Chinese year, and with his ability he will be absolutely safe. Jian Wushuang heard the words, pulled away his palm without knowing the trace, shook his head and said firmly, A year, too long, even the heavens are enough to collapse. Dai Qingben was banished in the sea of no sea because of me. I must go and take him out of it, otherwise I can't feel at ease. If he didn't do it for me, then it would be me who was banished into the borderless sea at this moment. Little Emperor said in a hoarse voice, But do you know what is imprisoned in the endless sea? Those are the sources of chaos in the old realm. Even my emperor dare not relax when entering the endless sea. Do you know? I might as well tell you now that once I was exiled into the borderless sea, I was almost sentenced to death. There was no waves in Jian Wu's double-faced color, and he calmly said, Even so, I must go. Then I tell you, if you go in, there is a 99 chance that you will die in it? Xiaodigen's eyes showed tension and solemnity. You must go, he said firmly. Hearing this answer, Xiao Dijuan stopped saying more, as if he had been relieved of most of his strength and sat on the jade steps. After a while, he said, The sea of no edge is tangible and intangible, and it is a place bounded by nothingness and reality. Even Dian Immortal will be lost in it. There is no real exit to the Sea of Borders, or it is said that only my emperor knows, but now, the key to the Sea of Borders is in your hands. Jian Wushuang heard the words, moved in his heart, and stretched out his hand to take out the golden jade ring containing the true shadow of Emperor Weiyang. This was given to him by Xiaodigen when he went to demission and saved his life on the void battlefield. Carefully rubbing the golden jade ring in his hand, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but said, With this, you can go to the borderless sea? Little Emperor nodded. This ring contains the aura of my emperor and can open that passage. How to use? Follow me. In the void, Jian Wushuang, dressed as a ranger and wearing a large black robe, stood in a very dark place. Beside him, there were only two companions, Xiao Dijuan and Thin Zipeo. The three bodies are like three eternal sculptures, and the void and wind cannot infect them. Has it been decided? Little Emperor turned his head to look at him. Jian Wushuang nodded and said no more. Then he slowly stretched out his palm, and the golden jade ring exuded a unique and magnificent glow in the chaotic void. The next moment, Jian Wushuang threw the ring in his hand into the void. In an instant, the void suddenly collapsed and torn. Thousands of brilliant lights burst out of the golden jade ring, illuminating the vast void. The flowing huamang is the emperor's way of heaven. They directly tore through the void, forming an endless passage. The river of stars turned, and the dappled stars were shining in the passage. The passage to the borderless sea is here. Ahead is the sea of no edge. Little Emperor said in a weak voice. Jian Wushuang nodded, and then he was about to step into it. At the same time, Xiao Dijuan quietly stretched out his palm and grabbed his right arm, silently looking at him without a word. Don't worry, as long as I don't want to die, I will definitely come back safely. Jian Wushuang said as he looked at him, and then stretched out his palm. Stepping into the passage with one step, the void oscillated, and then the huge galaxy passage slowly closed. The black robe finally disappeared completely in the passage, and was never seen again. The void was smoothed by the gang wind, and everything seemed to have never happened. My buddy, did I harm him? The voice was hoarse and slightly sad. The thin purple robe figure also moved slightly, and after a long time he said, His Royal Highness, you shouldn't let him in, even if Master Jian is shocking Hong Tianjiao. I am afraid it is impossible to walk out of there alive. After all, there is a completely unknown territory. I regret it, I don't want him to leave. Xiao Dijuan looked at the smooth passage and slowly closed his eyes. The galaxy was surging, everything was like a river of stars. Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the top of the tide and hurried towards the end of the passage. This galaxy channel is not as dangerous as Jian Wushuang thought. It can even be said to be very peaceful, like a quiet river. But the more so, the less careless it is, and it is far from possible that the realm that can make Diqing be so jealous is far from being as calm as it is. With entering the channel, everything is just beginning. Chapter 49-29. Turbulent undercurrents are often hidden under the calm water. Jian Wushuang knew this sentence well, and soon encountered it. He was far from expecting that everything would come so fast that he was caught off guard. Above the thick and ink-like endless waters, a beast with 10 evil reveals roared in anger. In front of this ugly behemoth, there was a sharp eyebrow, and the figure with the Xuanhe pattern surging all over his body was facing away from it. Jian Wushuang at this moment had a cold face, but his heart had already complained. He never imagined that he would be able to recite to such an extent when he stepped on the spot. Just after falling from the passage, the endless dark sea suddenly separated, and then an ugly beast with 10 heads opened its huge mouth and swallowed it towards him. If it weren't for Jian Wushuang's vigilance, I'm afraid it would have fallen directly into the beast's mouth. Seeing a dark halo on the head of the giant beast in front of him, Jian Wushuang felt his head grow. Because only the Dayan Immortal who is above rank 5 can condense his own aura of growth, which is a symbol of realm. Jian Wushuang never expected that he would provoke such a of murder if he only stepped into the area of this borderless sea. Facing rank 3 Dayan Immortal is enough for Jian Wushuang today, but rank 6 Dayan Immortal may not be so optimistic. I'm afraid it will be a fate. But before stepping into this borderless sea, you have to fight for your life, and the road behind is probably even more impossible. It is Jian Wushuang's task to retain his best physical strength. Facing such a giant beast, he also understood why Xiao Dijuan had prevented him from entering here before. What will be imprisoned in this so-called borderless sea? Above the dark and thick sea, the behemoth raised 10 heads at the same time and let out a huge roar. Under this huge roar, Jian Wushuang felt a pause in his figure. That is to say, in this moment of effort, the giant beast suddenly opened its forelimbs and rushed forward with a strong momentum. The sky was shaking, and Jian Wushuang hurriedly released the ancestral technique. The gate of power reappeared, and a giant finger from the sky came down. However, the giant beast just raised his head and let an ancestral art fall on it. Boom! The sea is raging, igniting the waves of thousands of feet, and the ancestral art that grew with Jian Wushuang's growth fell on the monster, and it didn't stop for a moment. Unprepared, Jian Wushuang was suddenly knocked out of the distance. The clouds were plowed into a deep gully, and he had been marking 100,000 feet before he barely stopped his figure. Jian Wushuang was already solemn as he held back the blood churning in his heart. The strength of rank 6 Dayan Immortal was far beyond his imagination. Right now, this behemoth may be fighting with all its strength, and it will be very difficult. If it is consumed in this way, it is definitely not conducive to the next situation. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang felt a little irritable, reaching out his hand to take out a D-pin pill from his arms and stuffing it into his mouth to chew it. We have no grievances and no grudges, and we can't fight to the death. You can't help me for a while. How about letting me go? Facing the giant beast, Jian Wushuang tried to communicate. A total of 10 heads, 20 pairs of eyes looked at him together. Just as Jian Wushuang was preparing to fight, all the 10 heads of the giant beast actually spoke. The voice was hoarse and thick. "Deportee, what did you just eat?" Jian Wushuang was startled, and soon understood the meaning of the giant beast's mouth, and then he directly stretched out his hand and took out a D-pin pill from his arms and raised it in the air. Suddenly, the extremely strong medicinal scent completely escaped in the air. Each of these Emperor pills is an Emperor treasure that the Emperor Lu Crow collected in the past, and is the supreme quality. The medicinal scent that was so strong that it could not be repelled filled almost every inch of the sky. The giant beast also opened his eyes wide at this moment. "Guru!" The throbbing twitch of the stomach resounded everywhere, and it was obviously greedy to the extreme. "Here, give me." Jian Wushuang heard this and smiled quietly. "Of course I can give it to you, but you have to let me go without any entanglement." I promise you." The giant beast's eyes were red, and it was salivating. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore. He directly bent his finger and shot the pill 1,000 feet away. In an instant, the giant beast also chased it out. He took advantage of this opportunity to fly and smash away. Feeling the disappearance of the sensational breath, Jian Wushuang secretly breathed a sigh of relief, and at the same time he was a little dumbfounded. Just relying on a pill to flick a 6th-rank Dian Immortal is really incredible. But the smile on his face hadn't solidified yet, and a sound of breaking into the air resounded from behind him. Jian Wushuang hurriedly turned around and saw that the behemoth appeared again. "What are you going to do? Haven't you already said it?" he said condensedly. Hearing this, the behemoth anthropomorphically smacked his mouth, then stretched out his huge forepalm and pointed to his head. "Anything else? I have 10 heads, one is not enough." Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. "Do you think I have a lot of pills of this level? The one I just gave you is the last one for me." He slapped his lips again, and the giant beast looked at him unwillingly, as if he was considering the truth or not. After a long while, the giant beast said, "Then you go, don't let me see you, and don't appear in my realm again." Jian Wushuang flew away directly, did not stop for a moment, and disappeared in an instant. And this time, the beast did not catch up. It lay on the thick sea, with 10 big heads thinking about something. "It's really strange, how could such a weak exile be exiled here? Has he done too many terrible things before?" The giant beast was thinking, and soon it dived directly into the dark sea, turned into a waterline, and marched forward. He kept flying over hundreds of millions of miles without stopping, until he felt that there was no aura chasing behind him. Jian Wushuang let out a sigh of relief. The breath of rank 6 Dian Immortal is too terrifying. If you continue to fight resolutely, I am afraid you will be seriously injured. Fortunately, he has completely escaped the control of that breath now. But Jian Wushuang did not relax his vigilance at all. He quickly found some pills that could cover his breath among the Emperor Pin pills he brought, and after swallowing them, he began to look at everything in front of him. The so-called sea without borders means seas with no margins. And right now, the thick and ink sea is like a mirror. I don't know where it extends, without any reference. Barren and dead. Chapter 49-30. Jian Wushuang tried to release his strength again, to touch the infinite sea under him. I saw that the power entering the water was directly swallowed, and at the same time, there were countless chain-like dark aura protruding from under the water surface, violently shooting at him. Jian Wushuang was shocked in an instant, and hurriedly jumped into the air, before being dragged into the sea by the black chain. Seeing the quiet sea again, he breathed a sigh of relief, and began to rejoice secretly that he hadn't set foot in the sea just now. At the same time, this also made Jian Wushuang understand that the hidden dangers of this sea of boundlessness were definitely far more than what was revealed. I am afraid that those who can be trapped here are the realm of Dian Immortal. After avoiding 10 giant beasts without any risk, Jian Wushuang didn't dare to act rashly anymore. After swallowing an emperor-grade pill that could breathe smoothly, he flew forward at a constant speed. Earlier, I learned from the little emperor that this boundless sea is between the tangible and the intangible and the intangible, and it is unclear whether it is real or just a virtual image. This has virtually increased Jian Wushuang's difficulty. If it is true as Xiaodigen said, the sea of no edge is tangible and intangible, and it transforms from intangibility to quality. This means that it is very likely to be infinite, and it can even squeeze a universe into it. This is undoubtedly a difficult problem. It is basically impossible to find the truth in this almost endless sea. But after Jian Wushuang only pondered for a while, he swept forward resolutely. When he didn't notice, there was an undulating waterline in the sea below him, following him. Damn it, isn't there a piece of land in this borderless sea? Jian Wushuang, who had flown out an unknown distance, was full of black lines. At his current speed, I am afraid that he has already flown over the distance of thousands of celestial planes, but still has not found a piece of land. This has even made him wonder if he is standing still. There is not only a piece of land here, but even a breath of power has never appeared, making him a little dignified. Just as Jian Wushuang swiftly moved forward, a sudden and extreme cry for help came from under him. Help! Help! He followed his eyes and looked down, and he couldn't help but feel shocked. I saw an extremely weak figure floating on the thick ink surface. He tried his best to push aside the water and tried to escape the sea, crying for help. In this extremely silent sea of no edge, such a weird scene appeared. Even Jian Wushuang felt an unspeakable weirdness. Almost 99% of the people who can be banished in this borderless sea are extremely evil people. If Jian Wushuang moved his compassion to save him, he might fall into a great passivity. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated, ready to leave directly. But the figure that was ups and downs in the sea said loudly at this moment, "Help, the heavenly fairy, help." Jian Wushuang couldn't help but look at that figure subconsciously. With his eyes facing each other, he was completely shocked. The figure that floats in the sea is not someone else. It is the truth exiled by Zhen Weiyang. Diqing? After Jian Wushuang once again confirmed that the sea area was Diqing, he immediately fell from the clouds and prepared to give aid. Diqing, who was ups and downs in the sea, couldn't help but be overjoyed when he saw Jian Wushuang fall immediately. At this very moment, the sea surface, which was originally like a crystal, suddenly stirred up tens of thousands of waves. About to touch Diqing's Jian Wushuang, he felt that the sky in front of him was covered by darkness. The sea was divided, and a giant mountain-like beast leaped high. It has 10 heads, and each one is like a day, terrifying to the extreme. At this moment, 10 giant capitals opened their mouths, and then swallowed the truth into their mouths. The terrifying aura belonging to rank 6 Dian Immortal directly shook Jian Wushuang away. "You want to die?" He was furious, and the behemoth that he had thought to get rid of completely was still trailing behind him, and even the truth he was looking for this time was swallowed in his abdomen. How could this make him not angry? But the behemoth that swallowed the truth into its belly still didn't know it, and even burped contentedly. Jian Wushuang was already completely angry. He directly condensed the invisible sword, facing the giant beast and stabbing his head. This is an absolute sword, a sword that is completely free from Wushuang Kendo. This is a superb sword of Jian Xian Ding Bai. Go ahead. Ding! The crispest sword sounded through the wilds and wilds, and an unimaginable martyrdom explosion burst open. Such an absolute sword broke open the power barrier of the giant beast, and then stabbed one of the heads heavily. Boom! The sword intent was infinitely wide, and directly smashed a big sun-like head. Under the pain, the beast was frightened and spit out a wave of cracks. The full blow of rank 6 Dian Immortal blasted Jian Wushuang's body, instantly knocking him 1,000,000 feet away. The power of protecting the immortal body shattered directly. While retreating, he vomited blood, and finally barely stopped his figure. Jian Wushuang looked down at his already somewhat collapsed chest, and couldn't help becoming serious. The full blow of rank 6 Dian Immortal was too terrifying. If it weren't for wearing a 9-day mysterious, I'm afraid the immortal experience would be broken. The vast expansive power filled every inch of space, and the sacred mountain-like figure of the giant beast also appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. There were originally 10 heads, but now only 9 are left. It slammed the blood from the dark mane, and said in a low voice, "Junior, do you know that I am saving you?" "Save me? Did you know that you swallowed the person I was looking for?" "Wipe away the blood from the corners of the mouth," calm Jian Wushuang said coldly. "Spit him out to me." "Spit it out? It was crushed into dregs long ago when I was eating it." The giant beast said grimly, "Now, you are ready to pay the price and fall into my belly obediently." After it finished speaking, the remaining 9 heads roared wildly at this moment. The air stagnated, and Jian Wushuang's figure was trapped for a moment. Then the giant beast roared and rushed over, and the clouds were torn apart by his giant claws. Although the anger was extremely furious, Jian Wushuang did not lose his mind, and rank 6 Dian could not resist him at all. If he desperately fights his life, the ultimate fate is very likely that he will also fall. Di Qing had been swallowed by that giant beast into his belly. What Jian Wushuang had to do now was not to fight his life, but to find a way to get out of here. After unleashing Yanli with all his strength and barely blocking a blow from the giant beast, Jian Wushuang did not intend to fight anymore, and fled directly. Chapter 49-31. Even if Jian Wushuang could cross the border for a battle, the number of Dian immortals that fell under his hands exceeded 3. But in the face of such a vicious rank 6 Dian immortal, he still couldn't fight one. Above Dian immortal, every third turn is a complete transformation, and the third turn to the 6th turn is a big change. That giant beast could easily break Jian Wushuang's ancestral skills, even the immortal style, which made him extremely strenuous. If it weren't for Jiutian Xuan, who had endured most of the heavy injuries, I'm afraid Jian Wushuang would be hardly capable of fighting at this moment. That kind of vigorous and pervasive strength made him suffer so much that it gave Jian Wushuang an illusion that the behemoth in front of him was not a behemoth, but an immortal that had experienced many battles. If you continue to fight, you will only be exhausted by the giant beast. After Jian Wushuang figured out this question, he directly used Wushuang's sword Dao to force him back, and then fled quickly. Want to go? The giant beast's eyes condensed, and it apparently had a murderous heart, and 9 giant mouths simultaneously spit out pitch-black ons. The 9 pillars merged into one, soaring into the sky, directly hitting Jian Wushuang's back. Boom! Unparalleled strength burst open. He was inevitable and completely withstood the blow. At this moment, Jiutian Yi Xian burst out the most magnificent blue, protecting Jian Wushuang's fairy body. But even so, the vast generative power stunned him in an instant, and plunged into the thick sea. The strength seems to be used up. The giant beast shook his head and said, then looked at the figure that had fallen into the sea, and threw himself at it. The immortal body entered the water, an unimaginable sense of deep cold invaded his body, and Jian Wushuang passed out completely. The giant beast stepped into the air, and when he was about to open his mouth and swallow Jian Wushuang into his abdomen, a black chain as thick as an arm came out from under the sea, quickly entangled Jian Wushuang's limbs and dragged it away. Seeing this kind of chain, the behemoth is like a big enemy, and fear flashes in his eyes. But this fear only existed for a moment, and then it opened its huge mouth again and bit at Jian Wushuang, who had passed out. However, the speed of the entangled chain was so fast that the giant beast swept away. Jian Wushuang was entangled in chains, and he went directly to the bottom of the sea, and soon disappeared without a trace. The giant beast roared, and finally he could do nothing. Withered cold, dead silence, and various unpredictable negative effects pervasively eroded Jian Wushuang's fairy body. He barely had some consciousness, but he couldn't run a trace of energy at all. He could only let the entangled chains drag him into the endless abyss. He barely opened his eyes and soon passed out again. Wow! The iron chain rubbed against the stone to make a toothy sound, mixed with the sound of howling water, resounding in Jian Wushuang's ears. He only felt the sea beating his back, and there was hard land under him. I don't know how long it took. When the meridian began to flow, Jian Wushuang finally woke up. He propped up the fairy body that was almost falling apart with his hands, and barely sat on the ground. At this time, he realized that there was hard land under him. It turns out that there is still land in this borderless sea. He was a little surprised and soon returned to calm. Under the final blow of the giant beast, even though Jian Wushuang was surrounded by 9 days of clothing, he still received the heaviest trauma. Although the immortal body was not broken, the meridians were almost broken every inch, and now he is struggling to even run his energy. There was a gray-white land under him, and there was no abnormal fluctuation. Jian Wushuang also sat up in the race against time. In this weird borderless sea, he must maintain his state to reach the peak before he can leave here alive. It wasn't until this moment that Jian Wushuang had some understanding that the one swallowed by the giant beast didn't seem to be a clear one. That figure seemed to use a certain secret technique to transform his face into a clear look, in order to confuse him. Moreover, the practice of that figure also strengthened Jian Wushuang's idea. As proud as Di Qing, even in the face of Zhen Weiyang's calm existence, how could he lose his stance in that situation? At the same time, it is even more impossible for him to be swallowed by the giant beast without any struggle. After figuring it out, Jian Wushuang swallowed another Emperor Pin pill and recovered with all his strength. With the nourishment of Emperor Pin pill, the recovery speed of the immortal body is fast to the extreme. Within half a day, Jian Wushuang had recovered 90%. He slowly opened his eyes, a pattern was flowing all over his body, and then he looked down at Jiutian Yixian, who exuded a faint blue intent on his chest. What material is this thing made of? Is it so against the sky? Jian Wushuang muttered. Jiutian Yixian, who was able to block the full blow of rank 6 Dian Immortal, hadn't even left a trace. Maybe it could really withstand the full blow of the Emperor. Converging his mind, Jian Wushuang began to look at this continent. This is not so much a continent, but rather an isolated island. The gray-white rock under my feet was full of potholes, and no weeds grew. I looked at the extreme desolation and loneliness. After thinking about it for a moment, Jian Wushuang walked towards the depths of the secret realm of this isolated island. There's another guy who lives and lives. An ethereal voice suddenly rang in Jian Wushuang's ear. He was shocked and looked directly at a raised boulder beside him. Immediately afterwards, a short-stature old man in thick fur walked out from behind the boulder. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed slightly, and he saw the old man's neck with a thick chain. That kid, you were also banished in? The old man in thick fur looked at Jian Wushuang as if he was looking at a treasure. Although he was holding back, Jian Wushuang could see his strangeness at a glance. Yes, you reading www. Com was banished. Jian Wushuang said calmly. The old man couldn't help nodding. Then do you know where is this place? Where? A weird smile appeared on his face and blood-red gums were exposed. Then let me tell you that this is a fallen paradise, and every guy who comes here has only two paths. Be killed or survive. This is the exiled free ranch. The old man slowly raised his arms and said with a strange smile. As his voice fell, a terrifying force belonging to Dianxian diffused. Although you are a little Yanxian, it is enough for me, the old man said greedily. In the next moment, he swept towards Jian Wushuang very quickly, opened his palm and patted it fiercely. Chapter 49-32. Facing the trouble of a Dian immortal who was only in the initial realm, Jian Wushuang snorted coldly, and 30,000 sword intent emerged in his palm. In the next moment, he directly confronted Dian Immortal. Boom! There was a sudden explosion in the air, turning the two ancestral arts into a punch, and the resulting explosion was extremely prosperous. Then there was a scream. I saw that the old man who was like a wolf before was directly hit by Jian Wushuang's punch and flew out. This scene was something Jian Wushuang hadn't expected. He was a little confused as he watched the old man who flew thousands of feet far away and then hit the ground heavily. This obviously belongs to the old man of Dian Immortal realm, and he is too weak. Jian Wushuang felt that if he used more strength earlier, he could directly explode it. He was puzzled and then flew to the old man who fell on his back. The old man panted heavily, his face was covered with blood, and when he saw Jian Wushuang coming over, he hurriedly got up and backed up, only panic was left in his eyes. You, who on earth are you? How can a small Yanxian have such strength? He covered his face and said with a trembling voice. Of course it is the one who wants your life. Jian Wushuang said coldly, then raised his palm. For the enemy, Jian Wushuang never had any mercy. When the old man heard the words, his face was ashen ashes, and then he knelt down with a plop. Please raise your hand and let me go. I have lived in this endless sea for countless years, and I just want to be able to go out alive one day. As long as adults can give me a way out, I am willing to do anything. Jian Wushuang retracted his palm and stopped killing. Tell me, where is this place? Have any strange faces been here in these days? The old man received amnesty. Master Hui, this place is called Exile Ranch. I don't know when it was created, but the one who created this place is still alive and is responsible for controlling the order here. It's called the Exile Ranch. It's actually because there are a large number of exiles here. If we want to survive, we can only fight endlessly. The dead Dayan immortal was used to fill the ground under his feet to stabilize this place. Having said that, the old man pointed to the chain around his neck. Only by killing a certain number of Dayan immortals can the chain be unlocked and live here. How many have you killed? Jian Wushuang looked at him. Ashamed, there is no one at all. The old man said with shame, I just want to continue to live. Jian Wushuang heard the words and said, Then in these days, have you seen any strange faces come here? Very tall, very heroic, with golden feathers in the hair. Listening to his description, the old man pondered for a moment, and then shook his head. Beat people, this sea of boundlessness is almost a stagnant water. In the past few years, no exile has entered, the person you described. It is impossible to come here. A frustration flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and then he turned around to leave. My lord, it's dangerous to exile the pasture. I ask the adults not to stay here anymore and leave as soon as possible. The old man stepped forward quickly, watching him gritted his teeth and said, The sooner the better. Although Jian Wushuang was a little confused, he also saw that he did not seem to be lying. After nodding, he was ready to leave here. However, everything is already a bit late. I saw several Wu Guang burst out from the 4 fields, and then stood in front of Jian Wuliang. A total of 4 bodies appeared with a strong and powerful body, and they all locked the strange visitor in an instant. 3 short and 1 high, 3 Dayan immortals in the initial realm, and 1 3-rank Dayan immortal, each of them is full of power to the extreme. But their eyes were all red, as if they had seen prey. The old man's complexion changed drastically, and he whispered, My lord, let's go. If you don't go, you can't leave. Jian Wu's double-faced color is also a little dignified. If he is dealing with a single Dayan immortal, he is not afraid at all, but now he is directly dealing with the 4 Dayan immortals, and the situation is already extremely unoptimistic. At this moment, the tallest one of the 4 Dayan immortals saw the old man beside Jian Wushuang, and suddenly sneered, So you old sheep boy dare to do it too? Is this your prey? The new exile? The old man called Liao Yangu gritted his teeth, and finally said, Yes, this is my prey, you leave. The 4 Dayan immortals smiled at the same time. Just you, the old sheepherder, dare to talk like this? Your prey? The tallest Dayan immortal walked out, and with a wave of air, the unparalleled strength of the time immediately drew it away. The old man flew 100 meters away like a broken kite, and then fell to the ground. All this happened so quickly. When Jian Wushuang reacted, the 4 Dayan immortals had already rushed towards him. The 4 unmatched powers burst into one corner of this continent. The air trembles, obviously can't bear the power of Dayan immortal. The next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyebrows quietly circulated a 7-star system. Xian style, a little mountain and river. The current bit of mountains and rivers is no longer the previous bit of mountains and rivers. It has already grown with Jian Wushuang's growth. He suddenly opened his 5 fingers and burst into a huge torrent. Yanli turned into a torrent and spewed out, and unexpectedly swept out the 3 big Yangtzeans who had rushed to the front. Boom! The torrent burst open, shocking the 4 Dayan immortals in embarrassment. After being able to stop his figure, the shortest of them, Dayan immortal, furiously said, Damn it, I must kill you today. After he finished speaking, a Zhang Su spear suddenly condensed in his hand, and then he threw it at Jian Wushuang. The long spear was rising against the storm, and thousands of handles were separated in an instant, coming like a rain of guns. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang didn't panic at all, as he quietly condensed an invisible sword in his hand. Standing with the sword, the long wind stirred the corners of his clothes, making him reveal a desolate and lonely breath. Wushuang Kendo Zingaheijianyani, the first style. Start. No fancy sword came straight out. In an instant, 1,000,000 sword intent came right away. The gun rain that came from nearly 1,000 handles, when it touched these sword intents, it was directly crushed, without even leaving any breath. And that sword rushed forward unabated, tearing the land under his feet. The little Dayan immortal who was the first to bear the brunt was suddenly shocked. He never expected that this sword would be so terrifying. The sword intent was like a mountain, like a sea, and immediately wrapped him in. The other 3 Dayan immortals avoided in time, and then watched this scene with a little fright. Chapter 49-33. The entire boundless sea is under this vertical and horizontal sword intent, setting off a huge wave of millions of feet, almost bordering the sky. The 3 Dayan immortals who evaded looked at the crazy sword curtain and looked at Jian Wushuang with lingering fears. How could this guy who can fight Dayanxian be Yanxian? Could it be that he is someone who has been exiled for countless years and came here deliberately pretending to be a fairy? Thinking of this, they all put away their contempt and prepared for the first battle. The sword intent that covered the sky and sun finally dissipated. The 3 Dayan immortals gasped at this scene. At this moment, the clothes on that little Dayanxian's body were all crushed, bloody, and there was almost no good meat on the fairy's body. He was crumbling, his figure was about to stand up. "You, who are you?" Suddenly spit out a large mouthful of divine blood, and he was terrified to the point where it could not be added. With just one sword, a Dayan immortal was forced to such a level, and it was also easy to reach the extreme. I am afraid that even the 3rd-ranked Dayan immortal can't do it. The other 3 Dayan immortals all backed away without a trace, their eyes dignified. The old man who wiped a nosebleed hurriedly sat up from the ground and watched this scene with wide eyes. Putting away the invisible sword, Jian Wushuang carried his hands on his back, his face was calm, and he walked slowly without any fear. Facing the 4 Dayan immortals, although he appeared extremely calm, he was already sweating in his heart. After all, they are facing the 4 Dayan immortals. If you don't suppress them in aura, it will be impossible to escape next. Regardless of whether it can be beaten or not, I will frighten them before speaking. "Just you dare to block my way?" Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, his voice full of supreme authority. The little Dayan immortal, who nearly fell under that sword, retreated again and again. Although he wanted revenge, he didn't dare to have any ideas. "Don't dare to stop the adult from going, you can leave immediately." He snorted coldly when he heard the words, then looked straight ahead, without looking at the few Dayan immortals, and went straight forward. None of the 4 Dayan immortals dared to stop them, they could only watch Jian Wushuang leave. Seeing them deflated, the old man grinned happily, and then hurried to Jian Wushuang. "My lord, wait for me." The old man followed him with a pleasing smile on his face. "You definitely don't know how to leave here. I promise to take the adults out safely." Listening to his words, Jian Wushuang said, "Why, is this continent still only able to enter but not exit?" The old man nodded. "It is true that you can only get in but not out. Once you leave, you will be alarmed by that person's breath. If he makes a move at that time, I'm afraid you really can't leave, my lord." "The one in your mouth is very powerful?" Jian Wushuang raised his brow slightly. "It's not just amazing, it's amazing to the extreme. Here he is the supreme existence. Even if the 9th-ranked Dayan immortal confronts him, he can't hurt him at all." The old man said, with a little panic and a little fear in his eyes. Jian Wushuang didn't speak any more. Just as he said, the mysterious existence that casts this continent is probably beyond the level of rank 9 Dayan immortal. Could it be the emperor? He thought in his heart, and quickly denied this idea. Even if Zhen Weiyang was strong at the beginning, I am afraid that he would not be able to seal the capital of the emperor. Of course, all this is just Jian Wushuang's guess. He doesn't want to know the truth or not. The most urgent thing is to leave here as soon as possible. "What should I do with brother? Did you really let that guy run away?" Shocked by Jian Wushuang, a few Dayanxians who were afraid to move talked in a low voice. The Dayan immortal, who was almost cut into a blood gourd, was indignant. Let's go with the four of us, I don't believe I can't get him one. Idiot, you are almost beaten to death, do you know? The tallest Dayan immortal, and the only third-ranked Dayan immortal, said in a bad mood, if we rashly attack him, you must be the first to die. Then what shall we do now, we really let him go? Another short stature, Dayan Xian with two beards said anxiously, kill him, you can change a merit. At this time, a small, dark-faced and extremely calm little Dayan said, this little Xiao Yangxian can't change a merit. Second, what are you talking about, he is really an immortal? The tall Dayan immortal hurriedly asked. He nodded, although he doesn't know what secret method is used to beat the third child like this, his aura can't be changed, it is undoubtedly a fairy. Then what are we waiting for, just rush to kill him and avenge me. The third child, who was holding his head, said cruelly. The tall Dayan immortal was thinking about something, and quickly gritted his teeth. Damn, this time I can't let go of this little merit. With the four of us, I don't believe that you can't kill the guy, just take a step back for the four of us together, he can't help us. They glanced at each other, and then rushed straight ahead. No, adults, and they caught up. The old man said hurriedly, but when Jian Wushuang reacted, everything was too late. For streams of light came down, blocking all his retreat from four directions. Seeing this situation, the old man was fighting with his legs, almost losing his footing. Jian Wushuang was also frozen in his heart, and the thing he worried about the most had indeed come. The oppressive forces released by the four Dayan immortals were extremely terrifying, and almost suppressed all their breath. The exile in this borderless sea, so far, the lowest level he has encountered is Dayan immortal, which is simply unimaginable in the outside world. And this also caused Jian Wushuang to be very passive. Hugging his arms, the tall big Yanxian with a non-smiling expression on his face looked at him without squinting. Boy, save your life, I will spare you a whole body. My lord, you can't listen to him. Once you lose, the ferry will be filled into the land under your feet. The old man reminded nervously. Lao Yanghua, if you don't go back to herd the sheep, this seat will be filled into the land with you. The tall Dayan Xian said angrily. Jian Wushuang, who has not spoken all the time, glanced at him at this moment, and then said quietly, my life needs you to take it, but not anyone can take it. Don't believe it. The tall Dayan immortal smiled grimly, and the whole body surged out, instantly covering the sky and the sun. Then I will try it today. How many caddies do you have? The calm-faced second child hurriedly reminded at this moment, Big brother, don't be impulsive. But he waved his hand, none of you should participate in this battle. Chapter 49-34. Jian Wushuang was overjoyed when he heard the words. As long as they are not together, there is still a chance of winning. Now Jian Wushuang is confident that even if he doesn't use his strongest sword, it is enough to suppress the third-rank Dayan immortal. Therefore, he is not afraid. The strong Dayan immortal must also pay for his arrogance. He waved his hands to block his three brothers from the battle circle. Gao Zhuang de Yanxian smiled grimly. Only greed was left in Jian Wushuang's eyes. In the next moment, he took the lead, and the power of the earth-shaking power was revealed at this moment. As the mountains and seas were pouring, even Jian Wushuang held his breath. The old man's complexion changed drastically, and after taking a look at Jian Wushuang next to him, he gritted his teeth and ran out of the ring. Facing the extreme strength, he didn't show any movement, just like a sculpture, standing still. This made the tall and strong Dayan Xian extremely angry. He shook his arms suddenly, aimed at Jian Wushuang and slammed over. In an instant, the world was prosperous, and layers of black ripples burst out. There are 1,000 layers, and mysterious runes flow in the middle of each layer, surging with an unimaginable general trend. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes were also solemn, and his right hand was condensed into a fist, facing the black ripples that enveloped him. The punch! Boom! The unspeakable blast broke out, and deep gullies were cracked on the ground. Time seemed to stand still, and nearly 1,000 layers of black ripples hovered in front of Jian Wushuang, and it was difficult to make any further progress. The three Dayan immortals outside the battle circle all watched this scene nervously. Jian Wushuang, who smashed a punch with all his strength, did not close the fist, but remained still. The land under his feet has cracked deep gullies, like a spider web, radiating thousands of feet in an instant. In the next moment, the nearly 1,000 layers of black ripples split apart from the heart of Jian Wushuang's fist. As the dark clouds dispersed, the great power of that kind of power was shattered. Wu Guang dissipated, and the tall and powerful Yanxian looked at Jian Wushuang in horror. This is his extremely strong immortal style. Even the Dayan immortal of the same realm has to avoid it. But right now, this is just a mere fairy who actually blocked his immortal style. This is so incredible that Gao Zhuangda Yanxian dare not stop to release the second fairy style. Great alien! He roared angrily, raising his arms to the top of his head, and at the same time, the infinite power gathered in his palm. An eye wheel with the size of 10,000 meters condensed at this moment. Jian Wushuang, who retracted his fist, looked up at the void. The black eye chakra that was completely imaginary by Yanli was a full tens of thousands of meters in size, and lightning and thunder snakes condensed in it. As the force of extension became more and more condensed, the eye chakra stared completely, like a magic eye, traversing the world. Under the shroud of this eye chakra, everything became dim. Let the ants die to this seat. The tall and strong Yanxian who stood in the void laughed grinningly. As his voice resounded, between his arms, the terrifying eye wheel slowly opened. Numerous strands of silky power burst down from that eye chakra, and the dark purple power swallowed the sky and covered the sun, terrifying. Under the light of that eye wheel, the ground directly incinerated a layer and quickly approached Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was solemn to the extreme, and the next moment his whole body suddenly condensed a layer of blood. The scarlet lines are extremely scarlet. This is the way of slaughter that Yuan Jun transforms the blood hidden in his body. It means the ultimate killing. Once the way of killing is opened, Jian Wushuang's consciousness will fall into an extreme thirst for blood, and at the same time, his own strength will even far exceed the addition of the true shadow of the self. Facing the demon eye's offensive, he opened the way of killing. At this moment, it was the confrontation between scarlet and dark purple. The earth enveloped by the meaning of dark purple suddenly condensed the meaning of scarlet. It was like a red prairie fire, full of grandeur. Even if the beam cast by the eye wheel swallowed it all, it still squeezed a crack abruptly. The black robe on Jian Wushuang was completely shattered, revealing his chest with crimson patterns. A dash, he roared, and the next moment he directly faced the endless dark purple force, blasting off into the air. Under his impact, all the Yanli beams were broken. Seeing the scarlet figure that had tore through the infinite barrier, rushing towards him, the tall and powerful Yanxian was already speechless in horror and even forgot to move. Boom! Jian Wushuang threw a fist, and the terrifying fist gang directly shredded the last layer of dark purple Yanli barrier. Fist gang greeted the storm and rose by 1,000,000 feet, with endless killing intentions, and finally blasted above the dark purple magic eye without any hindrance. This was the moment when the sky was so sad, the infinite meaning of killing, like a real sword, pierced into the eye of the demon. There was no magnificent and shocking death, and even this scene only existed for a moment. Then, everything disappeared like a passing glance. The tens of millions of feet of demon eye was shattered by the bombardment, and the tall and strong Yanxian was dazed in place, and he didn't even react. By the time he reacted, the figure with the whole body lingering around the scarlet lightness had disappeared. Then he felt a sharp pain in his chest, something broken. The tall and strong Yanxian only feels that the energy in the fairy body is passing fast, and it is impossible to condense again. He subconsciously looked down at his chest. I saw a palm pierced his chest from behind, and took out an extremely bright star. That is the source of immortality, belonging to the source of the three-turn Dayan immortal. The next moment, the palm of the hand was condensed, and Xian Yuan was directly crushed. No, do not want. After Gao Zhuangda Yanxian said these last words, he completely lost his breath, and smashed straight to the ground like garbage. With a boom, Yu reading www.ukanshu.com stirred up thousands of feet of smoke and dust, and the tall and strong Yenxian who had died, his corpse, when it fell to the ground, was directly sucked by some power and turned into a gray stone. The world is dead. The old man opened his mouth wide, apparently completely shocked by the scene just now. None of the other 3 Dayan immortals recovered from that scene. Their eldest brother died in the hands of an immortal. Shaking the broken fairy source in his palm, Jian Wushuang looked at the remaining 3 Dayan immortals with his red eyes. With a weird smile, his bloodthirsty intent was completely released. I killed one, and then I will kill the second one. None of you can escape today. Jian Wushuang stretched out his palm and pointed at them one by one with his fingers, as if he had been sentenced to death in advance. The 3 Dayan immortals were all shocked, and after a glance at each other, they fled in all directions. Chapter 49-35. Jian Wushuang smiled again. Want to leave? It's too late. His figure is like a bloodthirsty sword, rushing forward. As a result, the sky was torn open a scarlet crack. Leave separately and go to the center. The small Dayanxian with a calm face yelled, and then the 3 Dayanxians separated instantly. 3 streamers swept towards 3 directions respectively. Jian Wushuang, who was in the chase, smiled coldly, and then his figure quietly disappeared. For a moment, the old-faced Dayan immortal, who was rushing for the road, looked back and found that there was no chasing behind him, and he took a breath. The scene just now was really too shocking, killing the 3rd-ranked Dayan immortal with one's own power. This is really incredible and too terrifying. Even the eldest brother was beheaded, and if they didn't escape, they would end up miserably. Old Cheng Dayan thought so, but soon he realized that his figure could not move anymore, as if he was stuck in a quagmire. How is it possible? The next moment, a figure with a murderous intent appeared quietly behind him, looked at him with a smile, and then stretched out his palm against his back. Puff! There was a faint sound, and the blood of the gods spewed from the chest of the old Qing Dayan, spilling for 9 days. No, it's impossible. I'm Dayan immortal. How could I die? I have survived endless years. How could I have fallen now? This was the last thought that reverberated in his mind. As the source of Xianyuan was completely shattered, he also stepped into the footsteps of the tall and strong Yenxian and turned into a withered bone. Second brother. The 2 voices were startled, and the 2 Dayan immortals who had ran away madly stopped their bodies and watched this scene with Canthus. Throwing away the corpses in his hands like trash, Jian Wushuang looked at them with red eyes. After slaying 2 Dayan immortals, he discovered that the Dayan immortal in this isolated island continent was nearly twice as weak as the real Dayan immortal. Rank 3 Dayan immortal is only the strength of Dayan immortal in the initial realm. Jian Wushuang didn't know why this was the case, but this undoubtedly increased his chances of winning, allowing him to face any Dayan immortal with ease. After beheading another Dayan immortal, he didn't intend to let go of the remaining 2 Dayan immortals. And the 2 Dayan immortals obviously no longer flee, but rush towards Jian Wushuang in anger. The sky quashed, and the entire gray-white land beneath him was cracked by the impact again. Facing the offensive of the 2 Dayan immortals, Jian Wushuang was a little strenuous, but he was still invincible. The invisible sword condensed in his hand has turned scarlet, and wherever the blade passes, it plows the earth into a deep gully. Those 2 short Dayan immortals had a hard time saying at this moment. They thought they could kill Jian Wushuang with the power of both, but who knew they couldn't shake anything at all. The invisible sword with the intent of killing is terrifying, and every sword aura is enough to cut the earth apart. In addition, Jian Wushuang swung his sword extremely fast, and every time he stood with his sword, he carried 36,000 sword intent. One of them screamed, and his entire left arm was cut off by the sword intent and turned into powder. Hurry up! Another Dayanxian with 2 beards said in shock, and then turned around to flee. But what greeted him was a merciless sword. Wushuang Kendo Zingaheijianyani, the second style. River. A million sword intent suddenly came, like a hanging river in the sky, directly tore through the void and emerged. Standing at the tide of Jinha, Jian Wushuang threw out his sword at will, facing the two fleeing Dayan immortals. The invisible sword fell into the air, and instantly disintegrated into countless sword intents, and every sword intent carried the meaning of endless killing. The dark sky was all smudged blood red. Looking at the infinite sword intent that overwhelmed the sky, the two Dayan immortals' faces were dead gray, and then they let the sword intent trap them. Masses of blood mist exploded in the sky, and the millions of sword intent raging in vertical and horizontal directions finally dissipated. At this point, all the four Dayan immortals fell into Jian Wushuang's hands. With the retreat of the slaughter Wei, Jian Wushuang, who was standing in midair, stood unstable and almost fell off. He forcibly supported his figure, then quickly took out a few D-pin pills from his arms and stuffed them into his mouth. The way of killing was too overbearing, even with Jian Wushuang's physique, almost completely overdrawn. If he hadn't carried nearly 1,000 imperial pills with him, he would definitely not easily release the way of killing. After swallowing the pills and quickly recovering 90% of his physique, Jian Wushuang prepared to leave. The battle with the four Dayan immortals was too shocking, and it is estimated that other Dayan immortals will soon hear the news. If you don't leave in time, I'm afraid you will burn yourself. It seems to be to confirm Jian Wushuang's thoughts. When he was about to leave, a swift sound of breaking through the sky flew over from all directions. Like the streamer of the big sun and stars, carrying the endless momentum soon appeared. At this time, the old man lying on the ground showed his head in horror and said, "My lord, run away. The guard is here. Don't be caught." Jian Wushuang also knew that it was not good. His feet suddenly stopped, and his figure rushed forward. But no matter how fast he was, it was no faster than a dozen Dayan immortals. After dozens of breaths, with 10 body shapes, 10 Dayan immortals surrounded Jian Wushuang from every position. They all wore large black robes, and even their faces were hidden under the black robes, which was extremely mysterious. That's the case. Jian Wushuang also instantly noticed that the realm of every black-robed man was at the lowest level of rank 3 Dayan immortal. With a wave of the palm of the head of the black-robed man, a black bone whip measuring several feet long appeared in his hand in an instant. The black bone whip is like the spine of some kind of giant beast. I'm afraid that the ordinary evolving immortal will be wiped out with a whip. Those who destroy heaven and land will be destroyed immediately. A deep voice resounded from under the black robe. At the next moment, the headed black-robed man didn't say a word, and directly raised the black bone whip in his hand and drew towards Jian Wushuang. The bone whip rose thousands of feet in the face of the storm, roaring like a roaring real dragon. He suddenly condensed in his heart. If the whip were to be used, he would lose more than half of his combat power on the spot. Jian Wushuang didn't dare to hold big, and immediately retreated 100 feet, waving his hand to release the immortal style. A sacred mountain appeared in the void without any signs, blocking the impact of the bone whip. But just blocking it for a moment, the black bone whip broke open the peak, as if it had its own spirituality, and directly pounced on Jian Wushuang. Chapter 49-36. The black bone whip swelled up to the storm, and every black bone spur on it protruded fiercely, surrounding infinite power. With such a whip on the body, I am afraid Jian Wushuang could not bear it with the immortal body. Seeing the arrival of these black-robed men, the old man lying on the ground was almost frightened, and quickly ran away. These people in black robes are all messengers under the seat, the real law enforcers of the so-called Tianlu, and if any immortal dared to destroy a piece of Tianlu, they will be punished. The light ones were beheaded on the spot, the immortal bodies filled the continent, and the heavy ones were drawn out of their souls and endured endless years of flogging and punishment. Therefore, the Dayan immortal on this day and land, even if it is fighting and fighting, dare not destroy a little bit of the sky and land, because if it is destroyed, it will have the most severe punishment. But now, Jian Wushuang forcefully slashed the 4 Dayan immortals, and the sword intent he released was almost about to completely tear up the land of the sky and land. The destruction he caused was too terrifying, and the land had been overthrown by him. The land is divided into pieces by ravines like a moat, and the black water, as black as ink, is surging and surging, a scene of apocalypse. The immortal style released by Jian Wushuang only existed for a moment, and it was dissipated. 10 black-robed celestial immortals came from all directions. Each of them held a black bone whip in their hands, and with the swing of their arms, the bone whip was drawn towards Jian Wushuang like a real dragon. 10 bone whips, rising against the storm, blocked all directions and moved closer to the middle. Jian Wushuang had no choice but to resist. Crack! The delicate voice resounded directly at this moment, and the 10 bone whips intertwined and drew heavily on his fairy body. Jian Wushuang felt the darkness in front of him, almost fainting, and at the same time the bone whip was drawn on him, it was like 10,000 sacred mountains smashed towards him. There are hundreds of thousands or even a million roofs with 100 whips. Even the rank 6 Dian Immortal will never survive under this bone whip. At this moment, Jiao Tian Yi Xian bloomed with a blue meaning, fully protecting Jian Wushuang's fairy body. But even so, the immortal body under the 9 heavens' profound clothes had cracked scars, and blood spurted out. Jian Wushuang roared in pain, and his eyes became extremely red at this moment. He directly reached out and held the bone whip wrapped around his neck, earning it fiercely. In an instant, the black bone whip shattered directly, and the bone fragments of the entire bone whip scattered to the ground. However, this was only the beginning. Jian Wushuang was surrounded by the scarlet divine mark, and the way of killing once again blessed the whole body. At the same time, the true shadow of selflessness with a hazy blue intent is also blessed at this moment. The sky blue, blending with the scarlet pattern, presents an unprecedented terrifying trend. This is the first time Jian Wushuang has merged the true shadow of selflessness and the way of killing. At this moment, hundreds of millions of saplings burst out of him. The black hair wrapped around the pattern broke apart and danced wildly in the air. His eyes are scarlet red, and his pupils are indeed sky blue without any impurities, so magnificent and sacred. The reaction of blessing the true shadow of the selfless on the way of killing is far more terrifying than Jian Wushuang's imagination. This is far from being as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, but a geometric upward trend. Jian Wushuang at this moment felt that even the immortal body could not contain that terrible power. In the next moment, he roared loudly. With him as the center, the sky was directly torn apart, and the surging black water on the ground also set off huge waves. The black bone whip that entangled him was unable to withstand the great power at this moment, and was broken. The head of the black-robed man's eyes condensed under the hood, and he felt a tremor in his heart. No, it's impossible. How could I feel the tremor? He is just a mere fairy. He thought about it, but was quickly shocked by the scene before him. Jian Wushuang, whose limbs were almost locked, did not move, but the bone whip that bound him was quickly covered with cracks and was about to break. All the black-robed people were shocked. Looking at the cracked bone whip in their hands, they increased their strength again. The headed man in black felt something was wrong. He tried to retract the bone whip, but was shocked to find that the bone whip seemed to be sucked by some kind of suction, and he couldn't break free. There was something bad in his heart, and then he simply threw away the black bone whip in his hand. As he let go, Jian Wushuang also moved. A monstrous power surged from his body, and the bone whip on his limbs could no longer bear it at this moment. It was completely broken. Then, Jian Wushuang suddenly grasped the 2 bone whips around his waist and twisted it hard. In an instant, the 2 bone whips rotated, and the ferocious bone spurs on them were crushed into powder by the force. The 2 Tier 3 Dian Immortals who controlled the bone whip were unable to react at all, and the bone whip in his hand was twisted into a twist by that terrible force. But Julie did not disappear out of thin air, but transferred along the bone whip to the arms of 2 Daanxians. What? The exclamations screamed loudly, and the unimaginable Julie broke the bone whip at the same time. It also directly screwed off the arms of the 2 Dian Immortals. Divine blood was spilled, and both arms fell into the void. All the black robes were shocked and quickly backed away. Being able to break free of this bondage, he could never be as simple as Yanxian. The shackles on his body broke free. Jian Wushuang did not stop. His entire body shape was like a true sword converging extreme power, and he shot forward violently. In an instant, the originally encircled formation was shattered by the impact, and the two Dayan immortals whose arms were cut off could not withstand Jian Wushuang's offensive. Condensing the true shadow of the selfless and the way of killing, the violent scarlet fist directly blasted one of the black-robed Dayan immortal bodies into a big hole. Yu reading Xianyuan was also broken. For some unknown reason, all the Dayan immortals who were tied to this borderless sea had more or less reduced their strength to a certain extent. This is also the reason why Jian Wushuang would crush the ordinary Dayan immortals so easily. After blasting a black-robed Dayan immortal directly with a punch, Jian Wushuang cast his momentum unabated, and his whole figure exuded a general trend that was difficult to look at directly. With another heavy punch, the other Dayanxian with a broken arm could not dodge, and was blasted into powder on the spot. He is like a demon. Even if there are 10 great Yanxians around him, he is not afraid. Hundreds of thousands of guerrillas flowed around him, blocking most of the offensive. There were only 8 of the original 10 Dayan immortals at the moment. After recovering from the initial shock, the remaining 8 Dayan immortals quickly recovered their composure, released their powerful and majestic strength, and crushed them towards Jian Wushuang again. Chapter 49-37. After all, Dayan Immortal is Dayan Immortal. Even if his own strength is weakened for some reason, it is still terrifying to the extreme. Under the combined offensive of the 8 Dayan Immortals, Jian Wushuang's counterattack was directly contained. Even with the true shadow of selflessness and the blessing of the way of killing, he was in a disadvantage. Can survive in this endless sea to this day, these Dayan immortals are all terrifying characters who have experienced thousands of battles. Town! Headed by the black-robed Dayan immortal screamed in a low voice. One party covered the sky and the golden seal directly suppressed Jian Wushuang, and the other 7 Dayan immortals all released their first blow at this moment. Suffering from the enemy, Jian Wushuang was inevitable, and once again abruptly resisted the full blow of the 8 Dayan immortals. The earth-shattering martyrdom explosion broke open, and the old man who was lying on the ground watching this scene nervously was so shocked that he had no time to escape with his legs and was swept by an indescribable force. Like mountains and seas will fall, everything is like the end. This so-called heaven and land, nearly 1/10 of the plane, was reduced to ashes under this fierce battle. In the void, Jian Wushuang suddenly drew out a large mouthful of divine blood, his aura wilting to the extreme. The golden seal that came from that side directly broke his defense, and the remaining 7 immortals' full blows came over. If it weren't for the Zhixianyi Shen body, I'm afraid Jian Wushuang's immortal body would directly collapse. Seeing that he just spit out a mouthful of divine blood, all the black-robed Dayan immortals were shocked and unbelievable. You know, even the rank 6 Dayan immortal, facing the encirclement of the 8 Dayan immortals, can only end up in hatred, and the immortal body can't survive at all. But at the moment, this fairy evolving like a monster has refreshed their understanding. Facing the combined attack of the 8 Dayan immortals, only spit out a mouthful of blood? Even the fairy body is not damaged at all? What is this fairy body made of? It was the leader Dayanxian who discovered the problem first, and he noticed the flashing blue mantle armor on Jian Wushuang's body. Then he drank in a low voice, "Back?" The 8 Dayanxians retreated instantly. "It's late!" Jian Wushuang roared. In addition to the violent power brought to him by the way of killing, he was also bloodthirsty and warlike. The kind of belligerence is beyond imagination, even reaching the point where life is exchanged for life. Facing the 8 Dayan immortals, instead of retreating and fleeing, he directly confronted them. Among them, the great Yanxian closest to Jian Wushuang, even just released the Yanli barrier, was broken with a punch. When he reacted, his fist had already pierced a big hole in his chest. "Do not." Hypo Dayan was horrified, trying to cover his broken chest with his hands, but found that everything had been in vain. Xian Yuan was blasted to pieces, Jian Wushuang was like throwing rubbish, and he threw it into the void, and then his figure was almost at its extreme, and he completely rushed into Dangxian's camp. Facing such an unruly, but terrifying enemy, they were helpless. Above the chaotic sky, blood mist bursts from time to time. And the body shape of the 7 paths is constantly decreasing. 6 ways. 5 ways. 4 ways. Jian Wushuang seemed to be tireless, fighting back frantically, leaving the fairy body exposed outside the Jiutian Yi Xian full of cracks. He had more than 10 D-pin pills in his mouth, as if he was eating jelly beans. Once he couldn't hold it, he would swallow one and continue fighting. In the end, there were only 3 Dayan Immortals left in the chaotic sky. Of the 10 black-robed Dayan Immortals, only the last 3 were killed. This was an unimaginable scene. The head of the black-robed Dayan's celestial eye is about to split, and at this moment, only revenge is left in his mind. This was a shameful scene, and the next moment he directly shook his arms, releasing a powerful force. "Boy, I must kill you here today." Jian Wushuang sneered when he heard the words. "This sentence is what I want to say. Today you have 1 count. Don't even try to escape from my hands. Then see who is right." The leader Dayan exclaimed angrily. The next moment, Jian Wushuang took the lead, crushing them against them with endless killing. "Do it," he shouted loudly. As his voice fell, the 2 Dayan Immortals behind him moved. The strength that was so strong that it could not be added suddenly swept out, directly tied to Jian Wushuang. Being caught off guard, he had a momentary pause. That is to say, under this pause, the headed Dayan Immortal moved, and layers of golden seals appeared on top of his head, and then kept pressing against Jian Wushuang. The golden seal of this level caused Jian Wushuang to suffer a bit, and now it is coming again, and the cover is pressed down. Town! The golden seal enveloped him, causing some pause in his movements. Hypo Dayan Immortal was also at this time, breaking the golden seal and releasing a thunderous blow. Numerous strands of golden light shot down like a long spear, covering Jian Wushuang completely. The black-robed Dayan Immortal exudes a unique inch light, especially in the palm of his palm, flashing a deep inch light. The next moment, he quietly came to Jian Wushuang like a ghost, and then suddenly went into his chest with his fingers like a knife. Jian Wushuang's face instantly paled, and the palm of the black-robed Dayan Immortal went through the 9 heavens Yixuan, violently gouging in. Divine blood spewed out, spilling into the void. Under the black hood, Hypo Dayan Xian showed a triumphant smile. He saw through the flaws of the treasure that Jian Wushuang was wearing. He tried desperately, but it succeeded. Opening his mouth to cough up a mouthful of divine blood, Jian Wushuang's complexion was extremely pale. He also did not expect that the hidden dangers left by his sword at the beginning would be used by others. In the last battle with Joutian Xianjun Chang dueling, Jian Wushuang realized his strongest sword. Yu reading www.akanshu.com, that is to say, using his strongest sword, tore open the Jiutian Yi Xian on Chang Dueling's body, and finally shattered his fairy source. With the fall of Chang Dueling, he finally gave Jiutian Yi Xian to Jian Wushuang. But the gap left by Jiutian Yi Xian could no longer be made up, it was just a tiny wound. At the moment, he was seen through by the black-robed Dayan Immortal, and gave a thunderous blow. Although Jian Wushuang did not have a source of immortality, he suffered the most trauma. And the black-robed Dayan Immortal who tore his entire palm apart from the immortal body was also puzzled at this time. He was startled to realize that the weird immortal in front of him had no source of immortality. "Touch, have you touched enough?" Although Jian Wushuang was extremely weak, he still looked at him with endless coldness. Hypo Dayan's heart suddenly became alert, and when he was about to destroy it, Jian Wushuang did it first. Chapter 49-38. 36,000 swords were intent at this moment, blasting out with his palm. Because the distance was so close, Hypo Dayan couldn't avoid it at all, and all the sword intent was accepted by him. Zheng! The crisp and incomparable sword intent slashed him out, and the black-robed Dayan immortal was like a kite with a broken line, and he fell into the void. And Jian Wushuang couldn't hold on anymore. His figure was like a shock, falling into the void. The old man, who barely stood upright on the ground, looked up and saw this scene, and his whole body was shocked. Then he jumped straight forward and caught Jian Wushuang, who had fallen. Seeing him, who was covered in blood and severely injured and dying, the old man gritted his teeth and placed him directly behind him. "Don't go, put him down." An angry sound resounded, and the only 3 remaining black-robed Dayan immortals chased him. The old man stopped staying and ran wildly with Jian Wushuang on his back. As Dayan immortal, his speed is extremely fast. Obviously, he has never escaped before. But the broken land still restricted his actions, and the old man seemed extremely afraid of the black water and kept flying to avoid him. "Lao Yanghua, you are looking for death." Hypo Dayan was furious to the extreme, reaching out his hand to lower the unmatched divine punishment. Unprepared, the old man was directly blown out, and his whole figure also fell into the black water. Jian Wushuang cried out in pain, and then passed out directly. The old man also desperately wanted to get out of the black water, but under the black water, a palm of both hands quietly clamped his legs, and then pulled it directly into the water. "Help!" After a few bubbles in the black water, eventually everything was gone. The 3 black-robed Dayan immortals chased them, and when they saw that there was no whereabouts, they couldn't help being furious. The black-robed Dayan immortal, who was almost cut into a blood gourd by 36,000 sword intents, was furious to the extreme. "Look, dig the ground for me 3 feet and dig it out for me." Guru. Once under the black water, all the power seemed to have disappeared, and the old man carrying Jian Wushuang under the black water was throwing vigorously, but he couldn't rise at all. Jian Wushuang, who had fainted, was also extremely uncomfortable, frowning, and it seemed that he might fall at any time. If you look closely, you can find that in this extremely dark underwater, the old man's legs are clamped by a slender figure. The figure didn't seem to be afraid of the black water at all, swimming like a water ghost. His slender arms dragged the old man's legs and swam deep into the sea. The depths of the boundless sea is like a boundless black crystal, exuding an unspeakable magnificence and mystery. Just when the old man felt that his body was about to disappear, he clamped his body shape and dragged him with a sudden flick. After a while, the old man was thrown onto a land. He was smashed into pieces, and at the same time an extremely pure and extremely powerful force entered his meridians, constantly moisturizing. The fragile mind was repaired, and the old man propped up and sat up dangling. "Where is this place? Everything in front of me is like some kind of magical cave. All kinds of spar condensed from the purest derivation crystal, exudes magnificent brilliance." At this moment, the slender figure that had been standing outside the entrance of the cave walked toward the cave. The old man immediately entered a state of alert. "Don't worry, I don't want to act on you. If I want to act on you, you would have disappeared into the sea just now." The figure's voice was lazy and deep, as if only waking up from a sleep. The hole was slightly bright so that the old man could barely see him. The figure has long hands and long legs, and a well-proportioned figure. Although his face is not beautiful, it is free and unrestrained. On his chest is engraved with some mysterious flowing clouds and water patterns, with the reckless breath of ancient times. He came to the old man, then slowly squatted down. After looking at Jian Wushuang, who was lying on his back, who didn't know his life or death, he looked at the old man again with some playfulness. "Do you want to carry him and change merit in front of that person?" The old man shuddered without a trace, and then said a little embarrassed, "You don't fart to me. Your eyes saw that I was going to do this?" He smiled, and didn't care about the abusive words in the old man's mouth. Instead, he stretched out his hand to Jian Wushuang, and said leisurely, "I've seen the battle just now from beginning to end. He is terrible, very powerful, and easy. Only 3 of those law enforcement officers were left. But he has passed out now. If he is brought to that person at this time, I think the accumulated merits can set us all free." "What do you mean?" The old man looked at him nervously and asked. The young man with long hands and legs then said, "The meaning is very simple. It is to bring him to the person and accumulate merits. Can you do it?" Hearing this, the old man didn't rush to speak. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "I can't make a decision. He didn't kill me." Hearing this sentence, he raised his brows slightly. "That's a good answer. If you agreed with me just now, now you are a corpse." The old man's figure was startled. His face also became cold. "What do you mean?" "It's not interesting. We will leave here next." The long-legged young man shrugged and said, "When he gets better, let's leave." Jian Wushuang felt his head tingle, as if it might burst at any time. His spiritual thoughts that had already reached perfection were all chaotic and turned upside down. The immortal body had already recovered, and the damage caused by the black-robed Dian Immortal to Jian Wushuang was not fatal. What was really deadly was Jian Wushuang's own overdraft. The way of killing was too domineering, and it was extremely terrifying to consume his own power. But Jian Wushuang has been swallowing D-pin pills, calm to ensure the supply of the way of killing, which also caused his meridians to be overdrawn and depleted. Although he was constantly recovering, the feeling of overdraft in his mind still made Jian Wushuang in an extremely painful state. His temples were sweating like syrup, and even the power in the fairy's body was not controlled and flowed wantonly. This terrible feeling lasted for a long time, and when he got better, he immediately opened his eyes. In the eyes, it is a cave with mystery. And there was a strange face looking at him with a smile on his face. When Jian Wushuang woke up, the young man with long hands and legs smiled and said, "Congratulations on getting out of danger. You can call me Bian Ziyuan." Bian Ziyuan. A very unique name. Jian Wushuang's head was dizzy, but he remembered it for the first time, this somewhat unique but catchy name. Chapter 49-39. A young man with long hands and long legs, named Bian Ziyu, slowly got up and reached out his hand to the deepest part of the cave. "We have been walking along the road ahead and we can leave this sea area." Without answering him, Jian Wushuang strongly supported the ground and sat up. Although his complexion was still pale, the fairy body had recovered more than half. There is no goodwill for no reason. Although Jian Wushuang is still a little unclear about the current situation, he can still vaguely guess that the reason why he is here is inseparable from this young man named Bian Ziyuan. But being able to save him in front of those black-robed Dian Immortals shouldn't have too many crooked minds. As if seeing the coldness in Jian Wushuang's eyes, Bian Ziyuan didn't care, but continued, "This underwater cave was discovered by me at the beginning. It's extremely secretive. I'm afraid I'm the only one who knows the immortal. So please rest assured." Jian Wushuang nodded slightly, and when he saw the old man squatting beside him, his eyes were surprised. "You didn't go?" The old man smiled bitterly. "I saw that the adult was in trouble before, so I gritted my teeth and took you away. Who knows that the skills are not as good as people, and then I fell into the bottom of the sea. Thank you for your help." Jian Wushuang arched his hands. He hurriedly waved his hand. No, I'm still paying back my kindness, sir. Didn't you spare my life before?" "1 yard goes to 1 yard, thanks a lot," Jian Wushuang replied. At this moment, Bian Ziyan smiled slightly and said, "You too, hurry up. Let's leave here before they can react. It is the best policy." Jian Wushuang was still wary of this Bian Ziyuan, but the current situation was indeed as he said. He needed to leave as soon as possible. The karst cave formed at an unknown time. Its inner strength has been condensed into crystals, exuding magnificent brilliance. If this is not under the sea, I am afraid it will be a very good place. Bian Zi walked far in the front, was responsible for leading the way, and headed towards the deepest part of the cave. Out of caution, Jian Wushuang walked at the very end, always alert for possible changes. The karst cave was very long and there was no abnormality. As Bian Ziyuan said, it seemed that besides him, there was no immortal in this karst cave. The more you move forward, the pure power begins to flow slowly. Not knowing whether it was intentional or unintentional, Bian Ziyuan began to approach Jian Wushuang and walked side by side, with some unconcealed curiosity in his eyes. Finally he said, I wonder if I can ask, name taboo? Jian Wushuang glanced at him, then said, Mist. Misty? Yes, there is a hazy feeling. Bian Ziyuan said with a smile, it is very similar to the name of an old friend of mine. He didn't answer. Jian Wushuang had already raised the highest vigilance in his heart for these Dian immortals who were exiled in the Sea of No Edge. There was no exile for no reason, and it would be difficult to wipe out the resentment in their hearts after these endless years. Brother Wu, I think you are very face-to-face. Is this the first time you came to Tianlu? Bian Ziyuan asked softly while leading the way. Jian Wushuang nodded and replied, Yes, come to find a companion and don't stay here any longer. Bian Ziyuan pondered slightly, companion? I think the nearest outsider to Tianlu seems to be you, Brother Wu. I am afraid you will be disappointed. Jian Wushuang said, That's okay, you can always find it. That's not necessarily true. Bian's face was slightly subtle. Brother Wu, you have to know that this endless sea has endless edges, and its content is large enough to cover the universe, even if it is extremely easy for us to grow an immortal lost in this. So I think if you don't have a place to stay, you are likely to get lost in this endless sea. Jian Wushuang heard the words, nodded slightly and said, Thank you for telling me, but I don't plan to stay here anymore. Good luck then. Bian Ziyuan shrugged, then continued to lead the way. Due to the position, the old man gradually fell to the back of the team. At this time, his expression was extremely anxious, as if waiting for something. This karst cave under the plane of heaven and land has grown to its extreme depth, and even though it is full of power, it still makes Jian Wushuang a little uncomfortable. He is ready to deal with changes and release his sword intent at any time. But nothing happened next, and the karst cave channel gradually moved upward without any change. When Bian Ziyuan opened the end of the passage, the hazy light beam from the outside shone in. Brother Wu, it's safe now. Bian Ziyuan smiled. Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief, solemnly arched his hand, and then walked out. Stepping out of the karst cave channel, all you can see is the gray-white earth, without even the slightest cover. At this time, the old man who had not spoken quickly came to him and said in a low voice and fast, My lord, hurry up with me, I will take you out of here. Jian Wushuang heard this, although he was a little confused in his heart, but in the end he nodded, okay. The old man was overjoyed and hurried to lead the way. At this moment, Bian Ziyuan's lazy voice sounded, Brother Wu, where are you going? Leave here. Jian Wushuang replied and then turned to leave. If you want to leave with that old man, I can only say that you are stupid. Since you are so stupid, it is better to leave your destiny to me. Bian Ziyuan's voice changed from lazy to cold. In the next moment, hundreds of millions of violent force burst out, covering the entire sky. Jian Wushuang's heart was tight, and he directly released the ancestral technique, the Power World Tianmen, without thinking. But the majestic Tianmen just appeared, and it was knocked out by a giant palm covering the sky. At this moment, the original soft-eyed Bianzi was far away, and his body was full of majestic momentum, and the flowing clouds and water patterns on his chest were flowing slowly, full of general momentum that could not be seen directly. Jian Wushuang's eyes were solemn. Who could have imagined that this guy who looked extremely infamous and didn't even have a lot of power fluctuations was actually rank 6 Dian Immortal? An extremely mysterious light wheel emerged behind Bian Ziyuan. His eyes had become extremely dark, and the flowing clouds and water patterns on his body were undulating. The old man who saw this scene was shocked and sat down on the ground, terrified to the extreme. Originally I planned to let you go, but instead of being killed by insidious crap, it's better to die in my hands. Bian Ziyuan said, stretched out his palm cover and pressed towards Jian Wushuang. Beneath the boundless sky, the sky fell sullenly, and a huge black palm that stretched for 1,000,000 feet came down. Facing the full blow of rank 6 Dian Immortal, Jian Wushuang was inevitable and could only choose to face it. Fairy style, a little mountain and river reappear. A 7-planet galaxy flows slowly between his eyebrows. Chapter 4940. The Dian Immortal, Even rank 3 Dian Immortal, Jian Wushuang had the confidence to kill it, then facing rank 6 he had no chance of winning at all. The 6th rank is a watershed related to Dian Immortal. Once stepped into the 6th rank, it will be a complete transformation, condensing the light wheel of growth, and the strength is unimaginable. That's why Jian Wushuang was able to kill the rank 3 Dian Immortal, but when faced with the behemoth of rank 6 Dian Immortal, he ran away. Rank 6 Dian Immortal is a nightmare existence. But now he is unavoidable and can only meet up. The fairy-style little mountains and rivers are called out, and the mountains and gods rise directly centered on Jian Wushuang. At the same time, violent Tianhe shot out from his palm, turning into a series of groundbreaking exercises, strangling away. The world was magnificent, and the most majestic blow broke out. The sacred mountain stands, the Tianhe River rushes, and the star sea flows, together constructing the fairy style of Jian Wushuang. The most magnificent slaying explosion completely burst, and the indescribable Huameng condensed at the center, like a million days shining in it, astonished to the extreme. I'm afraid that even Yanxian can't survive in the center of this martyrdom. Bianzi, who was standing in the void, saw this scene far away. Although his expression was calm, his eyes had been replaced by surprise. He could feel Jian Wushuang's terrifying trend that could be resisted by the chamber, and it was precisely because of this that he was surprised. Is there really such a terrible Yanxian? As early as Jian Wushuang's previous battle with 10 Hypo Dian Immortals, Bian Ziyuan had completely witnessed the battle, so at this moment he did not think that Jian Wushuang would be determined. After releasing Geishan's palm, he only stayed for a moment, and then his figure disappeared. Unparalleled blasting the center, Jian Wushuang's figure did not receive too much blow. He quickly took out a D-pin pill and stuffed it into his mouth, preparing to fight for his life. Although there is no chance of winning against a rank 6 Dian Immortal, he is confident that he can escape even if he can't defeat it. The prosperous fairy-style Edian Shanhe directly offset Bian Ziyuan's blow, and just as Jian Wushuang was about to take the lead, a big crisis suddenly surged behind him. Jian Wushuang was horrified, and he didn't even want to break up and kick it out. The old man holding a dazzling force did not respond at all, and the hideous expression on his face was kicked out before he could even hide it. Divine blood spewed out, and the old man fell heavily to the ground, his chest collapsed. The fairy body of Dian Immortal could not resist Jian Wushuang's kick. With a mixture of fright and anger, Jian Wushuang was extremely furious. Why did you do this? After spitting out another mouthful of divine blood, the old man was so frightened that he backed away again and again. Jian Wushuang, who had already burst out his murderous intent, was ready to kill him directly. But at this moment, Bian Ziyuan appeared behind his back like a ghost, and then quietly pressed his palm against Jian Wushuang's back. In an instant, an unknown number of Yanli Huameng surged out, all bombarded. Jian Wushuang was inevitable, and his back completely took the blow. This terrible blow was heavier than the previous blow. Being so caught off guard, Jian Wushuang suddenly pours out a sip of blood, and his naked arms are directly shattered. Bian Ziyuan's attack was so terrible that Jian Wushuang instantly lost the ability to fight again. If it were not for the protection of Jishunaixuan, I am afraid his fairy body would be broken directly. Not dead yet? The corners of Bian Ziyuan's eyes trembled, but he didn't make any more moves, instead letting Jian Wushuang fall to the ground. Boom! He fell heavily on the ground, and the blood of the gods flowed out from the broken fairy body, and drops of blood fell on the gray-white ground and was directly swallowed. At the same time, strips of gray-white tentacles rose from the ground and then clung to Jian Wushuang's fairy body. These tentacles can swallow all the celestial bodies of the Dian Immortal, and are one of the main components for building heaven and land. Immediately afterwards, Bian Zi with an endless momentum fell in front of Jian Wushuang. He stomped his foot, and the tentacles that were supposed to swallow Jian Wushuang got into the ground one after another. Then Bian Zi slowly squatted down and looked at him with regret. It's a pity that a good seedling, I originally pitied you, but I had to cut you personally. It's a pity. Successfully attacked from behind, his eyes were full of pride and regret at the moment. But Jian Wushuang's naked arm outside Jiutian Yi Xian had been smashed. Unable to make any movements at all, he could only glare at Bian Ziyuan. Bian Ziyuan, who seemed to have lost his interest in beheading, slowly got up and looked at the sluggish old man on the side, with a touch of disgust in his eyes. "You scumbag, I have seen your impure disposition a long time ago, so you hide your murderous intent here," Bian Ziyuan said in disgust, raising his palm and preparing to blast the old man. At the same time, a loud sound of morning bell and evening drum broke the dead silence of Tianlu and spread throughout the 4 fields. Hearing the loud voice of Hongzhong Dalu, Bian Ziyuan retracted his palm, raised his head to look at the center of the sky, and then directly picked up Jian Wushuang and ran straight ahead. With the passage of time, the immortal body began to repair quickly, and Jian Wushuang's originally shattered limbs had grown back. And with Yan Li tied his Bian Ziyuan, seeing the scene, his eyelids also jumped. Judging from the strength and resilience of the immortal body, this guy turned out to be an immortal? But Bian Ziyuan didn't think he was a fairy cultivator. After all, how could there be a fairy cultivator who could kill nearly 10-day cultivators with his own power? "It's best not to move, or I promise you won't survive to enter the imperial city," Bian Ziyuan warned solemnly. Jian Wushuang, who was trapped by Yan Li, was still in a weak state and had no chance of winning in the face of him, so Jian Wushuang did not intend to do it. Pierced the sky, with the strength of the 6th-rank Dian Immortal on the side, almost within a few breaths, reached the center of the entire heaven and land plane. It was a giant city, a magnificent and fortified giant city. But no giant city can radiate that kind of ethereal and majestic general trend. Only an imperial city can be described. On the entire heaven and land plane, there is only this building, which is extremely magnificent. After seeing this imperial city, Bian Ziyuan's face also became serious. Then he carried Jian Wushuang and quickly entered the imperial city. Big heaven official. In front of Emperor Huihong's gate, 2 third-turned Daangxians guarded them. When they saw the arrival of Bian Ziyuan, they cried out with their hands. Bian Ziyuan nodded slightly, and then directly carrying Jian Wushuang, stepped through the emperor gate and entered this formidable imperial city. A wave of supreme majesty rushed towards his face. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.